Good morning and welcome to the September 10th, 2019 Board of Supervisors meeting. As customary, if we could rise for a moment of silence to remember those who have gone before us. Todd, can you please lead us in the pledge?
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, 4, consideration of extra items not appearing on the posted agenda. No extra items. 5, approval of consent agenda. Consent agenda is seen as items that are non-controversial, but somebody that can be moved by one motion. Somebody from the board can move an item or remove an item for further discussion or questions. So far, I've been asked to pull 5.3 for further discussion today, and 5.8 to be pulled, to be put on the agenda for the 17th. Anything further from the board?
No.
See no movement. Is there any public comment? See no movement. I'll bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, I move to approve consent agenda items 5.1, 5.2, 5.4 through 5.7, and 5.9 through 29.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is it okay if we take 5.3 up later?
Yeah.
Okay, keep moving. Remind me, so I don't
There's
have to go
a
back.
lot of people here that are not for that.
Yes. Okay, our 6.1 item, our 9 a.m. item, public hearing, consideration of final recommended budget for fiscal year 2019 through 2020 for the County of Lake and special districts governed by the Board of Supervisors. Just going to let you know if this item goes too long, we will table it and move on to our presentation of employee service awards.
Thank
Carol.
you, Madam Chair. We're very pleased to present to you for your consideration today the final recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-20. And I want to take a little trip down memory lane to June 5th and 6th when your board patiently heard all of the details from all our department heads on all of our mini budget units. Many as in many, not many. There are lots of them, and we went into them in great detail, and your patience and attention to all that was greatly appreciated by all. Today will be a shorter process. It's really a review of the things that have changed since then. And for your information, we included the June 5th memo in your agenda packet because much of that is still relevant. We're not going to repeat all of those relevant points, but it may be helpful to refer back to that from time to time. So as we noted in June, this budget is again structurally balanced. This is the first time in several years after the unprecedented 10 declared disasters we have endured. Fund balance carryover in this budget has resulted in the availability of one-time funds for some needed projects that were called to your attention in June, including roofs on the courthouse and for the jail Phase 2 building. This fund balance carryover is primarily available because of the high employee vacancy rates that persist in both the general fund and non-general fund departments. That vacancy rate continues to hover at about 23% in general fund departments. It's about 22% countywide. And what we saw in 2018, 2019, that was a contributing factor here, is that county departments only utilized about 89% of budgeted payroll, which is the lowest rate we have seen in many years. Property tax is beginning to increase. As you'll see by our comments in the memo there, it's a 3.33% net total increase over the, I'm saying that wrong. It's a 2.28% increase over last year's net tax roll. So for a total of 5.61, that's a positive indicator here. And we are also receiving property tax backfill for the losses resulting from the wildfire disasters, another factor that we are grateful to the state for recognizing Lake County's unique challenges with all of the disasters. We did not receive property tax backfill though, for our losses in 2016-17 and 2017-18. In the Sheriff's Department, we're recommending reinstating a $150,000 transfer from Budget Unit 1892, which is marketing, to the Sheriff's Office, and another $100,000 transfer from Budget Unit 1918, which is geothermal. That will restore the Sheriff's Office for Middletown Patrol Services. And as you know, by side letter, your board will have on the agenda today approval of the 80/20 benefit for the deputy sheriff employees, resulting in an additional cost of about $105,000 per fiscal year over the cost prior to adding that benefit. The Department of Public Works will soon deliver the airport runway project. It is on track for resurfacing before the end of the calendar year. Another great enhancement to our airport, much needed enhancement. And as you know, focus on airports has been a high priority in your economic development plans and a priority of the grand jury as well. In terms of fixed assets, and Stephen can go over them in greater detail than I will, but one of the things I wanted to call to your attention, obviously, is the purchase of the backup generators for multiple sites here with our county offices. The one for the courthouse is expected to be installed by the end of September. But there are more fixed assets than that. If you have additional questions, we can go over them in more depth. And we also are receiving some financial participation in the cost of those generators, which is encouraging, from LEAP, from the Lake County Office of Ed, and it's my understanding that our Public Services Director is in dialogue now with the courts to participate as well. So this budget is constrained by minimal increases in revenues and mandated increases in retirement contributions and the impact the minimum wage increases are having on the low end of our salary scale. As has been our commitment the last few years, we're continuing to focus on ongoing administration of the master fee schedule to make sure that fees are adjusted regularly to stay current with the cost of doing business. This is the first full year of implementation of our fiscal crisis management plan, and it reflects that first round of reductions of vacant positions. As you recall, that was one of our intentions in the fiscal crisis management plan, whereby we are increasing our organizational efficiencies, we're doing staff restructuring, we're strengthening revenue streams, and particularly supporting our revenue-driving departments. This year in particular, the reduction in unfilled positions has reduced payroll by about $1.1 million over prior year. This reduction has contributed to your contingency budget, which is set aside for future emergent costs. The cost of new general fund positions in this budget were absorbed within prior years' funding levels. And as you can imagine, with the continuing fiscal crisis management plan, further reduction of vacant positions is going to need to continue over the next couple of fiscal years. In terms of overall position allocation changes, the bottom line is essentially a net +3 from recommended budget. And those increases are one deputy sheriff 1-2 position, which has been added in light of the funding increases that I noted just a moment ago. The chief deputy auditor controller your board approved at your last meeting, and a coroner technician position that will come on board around January, yes, that's correct. So your board also recently committed to pursue funding for the feasibility study associated with the Potter Valley Ad Hoc Committee. We'd like to present you with some options for how you can go about funding that when we discuss Budget Unit 1781. At the same time, we'll present options for you to fund the other request, which was for a culvert in the Scotts Valley area. It's not our intention to go through every single budget unit one by one. We're happy to discuss any that you want to, but in particular, we'd like to point out a correction to you in 1011, which we'll do in a minute, and then the project options in 1781, which is capital projects, and that's where you can consider your funding for the Potter Valley project and also for the Scotts Valley culvert. If you look at the narrative
We're at
sheets.
9:11. Do you want to,
Yes,
are you
you could
almost
stop.
finished?
We're probably 10 or 15 minutes away from being finished, so we could stop.
So
Sure.
if you could write your questions down and we'll keep going so we don't keep all our employees here
That makes
waiting
good
so we can
sense.
get them back to work.
Thank you.
We will move on then
Unless
to,
they're interested in the budget discussion,
Right.
they're welcome to stay.
yes, they're more than welcome to stay. 6.4, our 9:10 a.m. item, presentation of employee service awards. And Pam's going to help me do that.
Madam Chair, for those that may not know her, I just want to introduce Pam Samak, our Deputy HR Director.
So as you read,
So we're going to start out with the 10-year awards. So we're going to start out honoring the 10-year service awards. Environmental Health Department, Kelly Hanlon. Okay. Mental Health, Edgar Ontiveros. Roads Department, Daniel Wright. Sheriff Department, Aaron Clark. Kelly Joseph.
Are those supposed to receive one of the awards?
yep, I'm not handing them
Okay. There's Kelly.
Social Services,
Okay.
Maria Castro. Tracy Kinyer. Michelle Leap. Sophia Pena. Teresa Schoen.
Yay.
Yes. So they're,
Come on up over this way.
yes. Let me get out of it.
So, most of them are the recipients, so,
15 years. Alcohol and other drug services, Richard DeWalt.
that guy's getting a lot of awards.
Building and safety, Misty Mack. District Attorney, Edward Borg.
Is it court?
Sheriff's Department, Dennis Keithley.
Remember of these ones goes with which? They're missed in the wrong mess.
Sure. "20 years, Child Support Services, Lori Grizzoli. Marilyn Wright. Department of Public Works, Scott DeLeon. Roads Department, James Stucker. District Att- District Attorney Arthur Groth. Jail Facilities Jared Boussard. General Library Amy Patton. Mental Health Sheila Rosano. Social Services, Carlton Baker. Travi Granger. Wow. 25 years. Child Support Services, Amy Jensen. Sheriff's Department, Lyle Thomas. Next, we have 30 years, Buildings and Grounds, Robert Allen. And last, we're going to honor a 35-year service award, Special Districts, Robert Sanderland. And that concludes our awards. Thank you very much for your loyalty and service to the County of Lake.
As we wait for them to clear out, we'll wait a few seconds.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're going to wait a few seconds. Get situated. Okay. We will continue, Carol. Thank you.
Here.
Do we need to say the item 6.1 back on the 9 a.m. public hearing?
All right, thanks, Madam Chair. Just pretty much wrapping it up. Throughout all of these budgets, the common theme is adherence to our Vision 2028, reimagining Lake County, 10 years, 10 key priorities. Virtually all of staff's efforts funded through these budgets is in keeping with those ideals, and we're proud to say that they are. Each narrative sheet for each budget unit, if you flip to the section that says Narrative Schedule 9 and 15, and you flip to what is essentially the second page for each budget unit, the form that says Department Revenue and Expenses, that has been, it used to be what was called a Schedule 9. That form has been adjusted just slightly per your request at recommended budget hearings in June, and Stephen will call to your attention the difference.
So the main difference is the Schedule 9 doesn't include the admin adjustments final or the admin adjustments prelim, so it gives you a history of when adjustments have been made from requested all the way through now. As well as at recommended, it only had the budget unit and title. Now it has, per Supervisor Sabatier's request, a fund number and what it's defined as, and the budget unit and what it's defined as. So it gives you more of a historical until now, instead of just a set of numbers.
So we were prepared to focus on budget unit 1011. There's a correction we'd like to call to your attention, and then 1781, so we can talk about your options for funding those special projects. But if before we do that, you'd like to review positions more in depth or allocations, fixed assets, capital assets, we're happy to do that if you had questions about those. You have a list that can show them the difference in what was added for capital assets, correct?
I do, but I don't have it for everybody.
So did you want more information there, or just go to those two?
Any
budget-
questions from the board? Supervisor Sabatier?
It's not a question, it's a comment, and I don't know, I know in the original format, it didn't show negatives or positives. Now you have the negatives in parentheses, just like they should be, but I just didn't, and I know it's a correction anyways, that the 20,000 is supposed to move, but below that, it looks like a positive 20,000, one above it, it's a negative 20,000. So somewhere along the line, something's not carrying over or carrying down, but just a little.
We'll definitely take a look. That's where revenue is technically a negative. We'll work it out.
And so that's really a great segue into the correction we wanted to call to your attention in the 1011 budget unit. If you look at, in that same section, narratives, page E3, at the top, under revenue, you'll see a $20,000 entry. Stephen, will you explain the error there?
The error there is, it was Fund 153, and instead of going into 1120 where that reserve fund is utilized, it was put into 1011. So basically that entry just needs to be removed from 1011 and then put on to page E17, that 8092 account, to make a new total of 411,630 adjustment instead of 391,630. So it's the same amount for the same purpose, it's just putting it in the right area.
Any questions? Nope.
And so then budget unit 1781 is the next one, and that is the one where we wanted to provide you some options for funding the special projects that you had in mind, which is the Potter Valley project participation, the feasibility study, and then for 100,000, and then also the culvert in Scotts Valley. And so we're passing out a list of possible projects. Do we have a few of those for the front counter also? Okay, I can't begin to get out, but and so these are some options of things you could cut in 1781 and 1778 in order to fund those two projects. And you might recall the first one at the top of the list, this Lucerne Harbor study, still sitting there, although you gave direction during recommended budget in June that you didn't want to do a study, you wanted to do the project. And so staff will be meeting soon with the other departments that will be involved in that project. So that 50,000 could be reappropriated for these purposes today. The Nice Clubhouse remodel, that's 50,000 probably is less than it would take to fully complete a remodel of that facility. Our guess is that would be more like in the 100,000 range, probably a minimum of 100,000. The likelihood of us getting to that project this year is probably minimal, so we wanted to make that available to you. The next two sets of funding for stream sampling, I'll take stream sampling first. That was not used in 18-19. It is something that you could consider using. The seed money for energy upgrades has been sitting for a while and has not been used. As is true for the department storage figure, the 37,884, something we need to move towards, but whether or not other priorities will make that possible this year, it seems unlikely. So just running through those, that's about 246,000 there that could be reappropriated elsewhere if you choose to. And we're talking about $250,000 worth of projects that you wanted us to look for funding for. And it's my understanding that there's a private party that's willing to contribute $10,000 toward the Potter Valley project. So with that said, we're looking for about $240,000. So those projects would cover that if you choose. We also have some funds we could reappropriate, at least temporarily, for code enforcement general support. That money has been sitting there for a few years. We're spending some of it this year. It's doubtful we would spend all of it. And then you have some big projects there. The South Main Water Project, that's an area you could borrow from. And probably our least preferred recommendation would be taking funds away from the deferred maintenance. The two roofs have been waiting a long time, and we expect that's probably kind of a minimum investment at $2 million for the two of them.
Okay. I guess I have a question then for Scott. Scott, do you think $150,000 is too much or enough for, I mean, I know it's hard to. Never too much. I mean, it's hard to tell. It doesn't look like a very complicated project, but you never know with permits and
For
everything.
which one? Which project?
The Scotts Valley
Culvert.
Right, you have permitting. We don't know the extent of that. I mean, we have an idea of the extent of that, but I don't know the exact costs and if the state will apply any mitigation measures or, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns in the permitting and environmental process. We're going to presume that the property owner will give us the right of way to be able to do the work. The construction certainly should be within the 150,000, but there's a lot of unknowns there with the permitting and the environmental process. I wouldn't be inclined to lower it.
Okay. Can we use any of the flood zone 4 monies for that or no?
There's a potential we could use that, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Because I know projects never are cheaper than we think, maybe more expensive, so at least maybe have that as a backup if it does run over. Any questions, Supervisor Sabatier?
Yeah, I have a question about a couple of them. So at this moment, the first one is just completely scratched off. Okay. The second one, what would be the plan for the Nice Clubhouse? As far as I'm concerned, it's been empty for a while. Has there been a demand for the use? Because I'm seeing it as a liability that what's our purpose for carrying on with this liability? If we remodel it, what's our plan? Is there a need for expansion where there would be a use for that? Are we planning to rent it out to the community? Just curious as to what the actual vision is for that.
Well, staff's plan would be to make it available like some of our other facilities for county functions as well as community functions, much like the Lower Lake Community Center, the room at the Middletown Library. And Supervisor Crandall may have some additional thoughts about the community's need for it.
Yeah, no, there has been concern about it. There's been questions about what we've done with it, because they know it used to be like a Lions Club or something like that at one time, and it used to be used for parties and rentals for events, things of that nature. I'm not sure exactly what it does now. I know it has a lot of upgrades that need to take place. But like, I think I'm in agreement. I don't know if there's a necessary plan in place. I know my predecessor had talked about it, but I don't remember what the plan was. I just remembered he talked about different options for using it. So I don't, like I said, I don't remember a plan or anything of that nature.
And I don't know if the Public Services Director has more to add. He might.
Because I was name called up here. Yeah, there is no specific plan at this point. We're using it for storage. In the past, I think you're right, Lions Club use. It was your predecessor. It was a project that he had put on, I believe, on the board agenda for the budgets. But at this point, 50,000 would be getting us started. Let's put it that way.
And while you're here, is everything there in functioning matter, like the plumbing, the electrical, internet, things like that? Or are these all things that would need to be part of the remodeling in order to get it up to code so that it can be used?
Option B there. It would all need to be upgraded or provided. There's no internet. The plumbing would need to be upgraded. We have done some upgrades over the past few years, replaced some toilets and done some things, but it requires to be used by the public or by the county for functions. It's going to need quite a bit of upgrade.
And I'll just be blunt, with the Vision 2028, I don't see this fitting into a revenue generating part of our vision. I see it as a asset that's not necessarily a positive asset at this moment in time. I'd love to, unless there's a vision, I'd love to see it in private hands and taken care of and dealt with that way, rather than us hold on to something that's not doing anything at this moment and requires a whole bunch of work.
I don't disagree, and at one point we looked at whether or not it could be sold or something and put into other hands, and because it's part of parklands, it's not really something that the county would be able to put up for sale. So absent a vote of the community folks out there that would impact. So, it would be a nice thing for the community, but certainly probably a lesser priority than the harbor project.
Right. No, the harbor project, to me,
that's why you see it on the list.
Yeah, to me, the harbor project is potential revenue coming into that area. The other part, the water stream sampling, water technical, thank you, Lars. Is that something that we can talk to the Blue Ribbon Committee about helping us out with some of those costs, since that seems to parallel what their vision and their goals are?
That was actually our thinking, and in fact, we believe some of this is happening through the Blue Ribbon Commission as well. These funds had been appropriated during the last supervisorial cycle for District 3, and when it was a priority to that supervisor and before having the Blue Ribbon Commission project going.
Okay.
Now, the Public Works Director may have thoughts about his planned use for those funds. We haven't conversed about that, so I'd welcome you to speak up if it's important to retain it.
That department and those functions are not funded now, and they are important. Your board, in your motion today and approval of consent agenda, approved a grant that we're pursuing. So we're continuing to pursue grant funding for projects of that nature. If the grant funds don't come through, then it would be helpful to have some funding for that. But we are going to continue to pursue grants and as you mentioned, the Blue Ribbon Commission, and we're looking for all avenues for funding for that.
So basically what you're saying is this hopefully is a plan B or plan C, because we don't want to stop the stream of sampling for the water stream sampling and the water technical review of the lake. But it could potentially not be used if you have the other avenues open up for you.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And all the rest, in my opinion, look good. I do want to highlight, because of our conversation we had about, never mind about the conversation, but I want to highlight the water line for South Main. We got to get some water to those people down there. We got to get some fire hydrants down there. I don't care what the status is between Lakeport and ourselves. We're asking the public to go down there and frequent those places of business. They need to be safe, and they need to be provided with adequate services. So I definitely want to highlight that one, that we need to push.
Supervisor Brown?
So I'm in agreement with a lot
Is your
of
microphone
what,
on?
what's that?
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm going to go in kind of reverse order because it's the big ticket stuff.
Sure.
The deferred maintenance for the two roofs, remind me again, the two roofs?
This building, and it's then jail phase 2.
Okay, so, so on both of those, that includes the HVAC, and, I mean, it's the whole thing for them, right?
It is.
For that purpose. And.
Well, the HVAC on this building has been replaced
That's what
fairly
I,
recently.
that's what I thought, so that's
Yeah.
not, that's just the HVAC for the jail? Okay. And is probation included in that too? Because I know we were working on that, is that one
At
of the?
this point, no.
No, okay. Is that going to be an issue?
Further deferred.
Okay, so that's the problem, and that's what I see with this, further deferment. That probation roof is already, exponentially higher than what it would have been if we would have just done it. Back, and we can't afford to do that here or at the jail. So is 2 million even going to be enough?
Well, we have, it's $1 million each, let's put it that way. Now,
Okay.
those are rough figures. One benefit we have with the courthouse roof is the court's share.
Sharing the cost.
Exactly.
Right.
We have that submitted into them, and I can't say we have approval, but it's going through
Yeah.
the normal process that we have. HVAC on this building, they've been replaced. The county HVAC equipment, now the court's equipment, that's a separate system. Pretty old, but that's on them. The jail, I'll have to look into the details about the HVAC, where they are up on the roof. It is an entirely different type of roof over there.
Right.
But the estimate that we received for both of these, the appropriations that we would need would be covered under 2 million. We would be getting, don't quote me on the numbers, but I believe for this building, it's about 175,000 back from the courts.
Okay. So, first of all, I think we got to move forward with these. We got to get this done. It's not going to get any cheaper. It's
Right.
just going to increase a lot if we don't. That's my opinion of it. What I would like to do is, and I'm going to ask this on a few of these, to agendize those. I want to know exactly what's going to cost. I want to get a cost on that. So if we can bring that back, so that way we know exactly what it is that we're dealing with.
For 6160.
Yeah, for the 6160 account. And then the water line for South Main, same thing there. We've done a lot of work on that to get it ready to where we can kind of identify how much it's going to cost and funding sources. So maybe Jan could bring something back to us on that. It'll help us to make a decision on what to do with the money or whether we need to add more money to it, because both of those are really important that we need to move forward, and they're
And
big
the
items.
discussions with USDA about the South Main
Right.
project have been reopened.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging.
So it may not be 2.4 million for us in that. So, and I agree, we got to get water down there. Yeah. Code enforcement support, I don't disagree with that number, but I don't know that we need to come up with the whole 250,000 right now. Let's see what they need, if what their staffing levels are, maybe they could bring that back as an agenda item as well.
Currently, we're funding a code enforcement manager
Yeah,
through there, as well as there's a code enforcement officer that's part of that.
So several years ago, your board set aside some funding for code enforcement, and we are spending some of that this year. And this is an amount that we believe could be repurposed short-term.
okay,
for
so,
this
and the only reason, and I'm not being critical of the department at all, I know that they've got, so many things to do, but we used to have abatement cases here weekly. We don't have those, we haven't had one for a long time, for, not just abatement, but recovering these costs. These costs should be recovering back. There should be, when we do an abatement, that should go on that property, and then we get the money back when the taxes are paid or when the property transfers. So it shouldn't be a $250,000 cost to us without seeing some of it recovered. So I just want to,
The 250 is for
ahead.
staff.
well, and so is the abatement. The abatement recovers the cost of staff. No, it's not everything. Not everything's recoverable. I get that. But, some of them, you send a letter out and they voluntarily abate them. We don't get money back on that. I get that. But I haven't seen, in just this one line item, we can't really see how much we're spending and how much we're getting back. We're just seeing that it's $250,000 for code enforcement. So,
I guess what we're trying to say, though, is that this was previously set aside. It does not appear that it will be used this year, although some of the other funds
Got it.
are. So it could be repurposed if you choose to.
some of it,
Yes,
okay.
All of the 250.
all the
All of it?
250.
Oh, okay.
Because there was approximately 500,000 set aside, and we're spending it. We're staffing up. code
Okay,
enforcement.
all right, so all of it could be repurposed, or some, or a part of it.
All of the 250.
Which brings up another question that maybe we should be using more money at code enforcement level, because we can certainly use
Well,
it.
and we are using
we're
some
trying to
more
do.
this
Yeah,
year.
okay.
She's
I'm sure
added some code
Michael would
enforcement
agree with
staff.
that. Yeah, okay,
Yeah, we all agree with that.
okay. Department storage facility, let's agendize that. Let's figure out what it is we're gonna do, because there's two options here available, and there may be even more, but storage is always an issue that, you know, we may need to do both of these. I mean, I
So
don't think.
the Space Committee met recently to discuss storage, and honestly, in light of many other priorities, I don't think we foresee getting to this issue this year.
Okay.
That's why
All right.
those funds are there.
Okay,
It's
I don't-
not that it's unimportant, it's just a matter of how
Well,
much
if-
staff can get
Right,
to. in
and
light of-
that brings up another issue, staffing part of it for that one, for the seed money for upgrades, energy upgrades and efficiency, and the Nice Clubhouse remodel. Those three are on the list, but maybe not so much the energy updates, or the energy upgrades, because that would be done by a contractor. But if and when it gets done, but the other two would be done by our staff. And there's a cost to it that we may be able to spend that money somewhere else, but I can guarantee you, there's other places that our staff could be working, that we need them working too. If we pull them off of that, off of a job, or to put them on that job, we have to pull them off of something else that's equally or more important. And we gotta really pay attention to that, because that's the staff, we're not increasing staff at all.
Well, that's perfect that you brought that up. That's one of the reasons I came up here, and I appreciate quickly. We're not at a loss for deferred maintenance. So those projects, whether it's our own deferred maintenance that we need to get to, or other projects that are priorities for departments that have a specific need, those need to get done. So that's one reason that I came up. The other, and I may be shooting myself in the foot a little bit here, but Budget Unit 7011 on the capital asset list has a chipper that is an option. It's not an absolute need this year. So again, I'm cutting myself, but I just want to throw that out there. It is general fund, so that's something to consider. My Parks and Rec superintendent isn't here, so I'm glad he's not.
And the chipper he's
Well,
referring to
that may be low on the
is,
list. I think the chipper's.
the chipper he's referring to is budgeted at
Yeah,
40,000.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. The clubhouse is not, it's not a thing for me. I'm done being a landlord for outside entities. I don't, we lose so much money doing that, what we think is good for the community. It's really not. I don't see any good coming from it. We've done that with rentals, in the Lucerne Harbor. We've done it, we think about doing it here. The reality is, you spend $100,000 on a building that then, some agency is gonna come forward, and they're gonna lobby the supervisors, and they're gonna think, we're a nonprofit, and we need this, we need that, and they're gonna end up getting it for $1 a year, or some stupid thing. So it makes no sense at all to spend that kind of money. And then, not just that, but if we do decide to sell it, you have a building that you can sell right now for $100,000. You dump $100,000 in it, and you turn around and sell it for still for $100,000. You don't get $100,000 more out of the sale of it. So if we're gonna dump it, let's dump it. And I get the part about it being part of the park funds, but there are ways to do that unless it came from the bond. I don't know if that's the purchase of it came from the bond, but there are ways we looked at that when we were talking about options for Trailside Park years ago. And we may have to give the money back, some of it, but we may be, sometimes you just cut your loss. So instead of dumping more money into it. So anyway, I want to look at that. Lucerne Harbor study, I'm glad we don't have to deal with that.
Well, that's already in there. What you have in front of you, it's presumed based on the direction you gave us in June, that the Lucerne
I got it.
Harbor docks and dredging is in there. These are options of things you could cut in order to pay for the two projects we're talking
I was going to
about.
get to that. I'm glad that that's already
Okay.
been decided, because we don't have to hash over that again.
Great.
The water stream sampling, if we don't get the grant, Is the $63,000, is that going to be enough to do it? Because that's $63,000 for just equipment, Scott, or? I don't think it's been determined. Okay, so we don't even know. Okay. Because if it's equipment that needs to be purchased, that's a one-time thing and maybe need to do some upgrades. But if it's $63,000 to do these testing, do testing and whatever needs to be done, that may be ongoing. That may be something that needs to be expended every single year. Maybe not that same number, but we need to know that right up front. So maybe that's another agenda item. So anyway, I agree with getting the money from somewhere, but I don't think we know where to get it from exactly, except for the Lucerne Harbor study and the Nice Clubhouse remodel, and that may be enough. That right there might be enough to come up with the money we need, correct?
I think so.
Okay.
But then
We
I
need
think
250.
We need
We have
250.
240 if you.
Oh,
240.
Somebody is chipping in 10,000 on the Potter Valley
Potter
project.
Valley project.
Okay.
What about the 250 that you said is not necessary for the code enforcement?
I didn't say 250 wasn't necessary. I said we may not need the
Well,
whole thing.
You could take one-
based
Oh, they
on what,
said-
based
I
on what
got
the
you. Okay.
admin staff
You
said.
could take 140 of that
Okay. Okay, so that would give you the money that you need.
and still,
Okay.
sustain the increases that we've made to code enforcement staffing.
Got it.
We're not going to hurt that.
Okay.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I just,
I did have one other thing though, and I want to, we really need to have these two big items agendized because we may be taking $240,000 of something that should have probably gone to them.
just to find out what the actual costs
Yeah,
are.
because we need to know for sure if it's the water line for South Main, what that's going to be, and the deferred maintenance for the roofs and HVAC, so.
Yeah, we can ask both, well,
Okay.
obviously one department is listening. I'm not sure if Jan Coppinger is here, but,
Cheers.
Yeah,
oh, she is. Okay.
okay.
I agree to bring it to us so we can keep those projects pushed, rather than coming back at mid-year budget review or next budget review just to see that it's still on there. I just wanted to mention, and I won't delve too deep into the weeds of it, but I know that in Clear Lake, we've made a huge difference by reducing the fees for code enforcement, or the fines on code enforcement, but it goes directly to the franchise tax board. And just in the past year, they've accrued $300,000 in fees or in fines compared to much lower returns in the past. So people are paying because the fees are much less, but because we're also hitting them in a place where they have to pay, it's going to the franchise tax board. And I think that we need to try and mimic those types of policies where we can see the return on the investment that we're putting into the communities.
And maybe we should agendize this, but just there's a difference between fines and recovering the abatement costs.
Abatement cannot be recovered in that way. Yeah, you're right.
Right, because we don't have fines.
And we should.
To that, well, you're saying reduce the fines to Clear Lake, we don't have the same.
I believe we do have fines for daily not meeting those.
Well, the abatement fees that we've been seeing are the actual cost of.
Right.
The cost of, having the contractor come in at staff time and all that, but,
We do utilize penalties in certain cases for zoning ordinance violations.
right. But for code enforcement stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? for
And maybe we could agendize that and find out what those numbers are.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, so I just wanted to add, we talked about the Potter Valley project, well, actually, first, I want to make sure that the harbor study, this is an additional 50,000 on top of the 6311 that's in 1781, correct?
Yeah, we have 250,000 set aside for docks and dredging.
Okay, and so this would have been an extra 50, and so
Yes.
that's why it's able, okay,
Yes.
good.
And the board didn't agree with that idea, just wanted to go forward.
Excellent. Okay, and so just to kind of give some history on the Potter Valley project situation, there is a private party that offered to pay $10,000, so that would bring that cost down to $90,000 to be part of the planning partnership agreement for the feasibility study. And so if we were able to do that, that would be the cost. I am in support also of the Scott Creek culvert, as it has an effect into Blue Lakes, where I'm getting some constituents calling me about some situations out there. So, I think that's a very necessary project as well. The Nice Clubhouse, I'm in agreement. I think we can apply that to one of these projects as well. in my opinion. And so I'm also thinking that with the code enforcement support, I want to make sure that they have what they need. But if it's going to be sitting and waiting until maybe possibly the next year, could we take from it and replenish it with possibly cannabis tax or something of that nature? There's just an
It would be
idea.
the intent to replenish it, absolutely.
And so with that, I'm in support of making those changes in order to provide for both projects.
Anything further?
Yeah.
Supervisor
No,
Simon?
Just, I'll follow on with all the discussion is, I absolutely agree. Lucerne Harbor and East Clubhouse and 140 from the code enforcement set aside, I think that's the way to go about it.
And I also agree with that. With that, I open up to public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing no movement, then I'll bring it back to the board.
Well, I also wanted to say that I do support agendizing those other items as well to make sure we get a better idea of what's going on with that and whatever we need to do to make sure that takes place.
Okay. So is there any further? So we,
That completes our comments. Did you? You did?
Lars?
Okay.
A quick question. To agendize those, we're talking about the roofs. We do have, what I can tell you is that we have a roof asset management plan for each roof. Cost estimates are about $700,000 for this roof, about $750 to $800 for the jail. Factoring the fact that we are, at the preliminary design stage, I think 30% contingency is appropriate, which gets us up to about $1 million per building. Plus this one, we did not know. We have responsibility for the cell carriers on the roof to adjust as necessary for our roof project. Looks like we're identifying a way that will be a very minimal cost, but there's a lot of unknowns. So that's why the figures, yes, are less than $2 million, but based on contingency where we are with the design, it's appropriate to put it up to $2 million. So there's a good likelihood that we would be under, but I don't think it's appropriate to assume at this point.
And agendizing this is probably a good idea, because we're not designing a roof, it's already up there.
No, correct, but there's, we will agendize it and bring it to you when we get to a point where we have better figures.
Yeah,
put it that
got
way.
it, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, then I need Supervisor Sabatier, did you have?
So I have one more favor, and maybe we could do this when the mid-year budget review comes back. And in our ad hoc committee with the treasurer and tax collector, we've been talking a little bit about the teeter fund, and I don't see a budget sheet for the teeter fund, and I think it would be really interesting to have that available to the board as well as the public to know where we stand on that, just because it's an important one for making sure that all our taxable districts, school districts, fire districts, all have the ability to receive the funds they need for people that aren't paying their property taxes. And I think it's a useful budget item.
Kathy, would you like to come up and talk a little bit about teeter?
Doesn't look like she wants to, but she's coming.
I didn't warn her this was a question.
It is a much larger conversation, and I'm happy to bring that before your board. It's not a discretionary pot of money for the Board of Supervisors. So I can certainly bring that to your board at a later date.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm not looking to
Yeah, we could-
pull
if-
money out of it.
If you can have that by 11, that'd be great. Should give you plenty of time.
And just to clarify, when you talk about those agencies that receive a part of that, the teeter fund is a mechanism so that those agencies receive 100%. The teeter fund is the excess on the penalties and interest
Right.
that comes back to the general fund for fronting those monies to the agencies throughout the years.
Right.
Right.
But we'll get into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah, a workshop on teeter, I think, would be helpful.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'm looking for action. Adopt a resolution. Should we go about, instead of just offering the resolution, do we need to determine where we're going to be pulling the funds for those two special projects, Anita?
Are you going to, if you're going to make adjustments to the budget, then yeah, you need to amend and then
Offer.
approve the resolution. So whatever adjustments you're making and the budget is presented.
Okay, so based on the board's input, what would the recommendation be for the?
The recommendation would be to reappropriate the $50,000 for the Lucerne Harbor in Budget Unit 1781, and the 50,000, well, it's in account 2380, the 53,000 in that, 50,000 in that same budget account 6313, you're going to reappropriate that, let's say 90,000 of that to the Potter Valley project. And then you're going to reappropriate the additional 10 of that to the Scotts Valley Culvert project. And additionally, same budget unit 1781, account code 5507, you're reappropriating 140,000 additional to the Scotts Valley Culvert project.
So I'll offer the resolution with those recommended changes.
Second.
The resolution's been offered. Call roll.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Bye.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye. And then B, adopt the resolution establishing new classifications.
I'll offer the resolution.
Resolution's been offered. Please call roll.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye. And then C, approve continuation of the informational hiring freeze. That's a motion.
Yeah, move to approve as
Second.
recommended.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move on to our 6.2 item, or 9:05 a.m. item, public input. Is there any public input? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to our 6.3 items, 9:06 a.m., consideration of continuation of a local health emergency and order prohibiting of endangerment of the community through the unsafe removal, transportation, and disposal of fire debris for the Mendocino Complex fire.
Morning, your
Denise.
board. Denise Pomeroy, Health Services Director. I'm here on the behalf of Dr. Gary Pace, our interim health officer, who could not be with us today as he had a prior commitment. The health officer and the health department are requesting your board's consideration to continue the local health emergency relating to the Mendocino Complex fire as it continues to endanger the community through there are about 17 properties that have not been cleaned up yet and 3 to 5 that will need abatement in the near future. I do have information. Jazz G. King, our EH director, also had other commitments today, wasn't unable to be here, but we are in communications with Cal Recycle on that phase 2 of that project to get them back here. Our last communication was a week ago, and they anticipate late September to early October, and the finish it'll be cleaned up by the end of October before the rain season starts. They are having some issues with some road permit applications and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Army Corps of Engineers, so they're trying to get those resolved so they can get back here. These properties are way, way up on some really, I don't want to say dangerous roads, but for the equipment they have to take up there, they have to get their permits in line, so.
Is there any questions from the board? Supervisor Sabatier?
And you're saying that all 17 would be cleaned up by October?
Yes, all 17 are scheduled in phase 2, which would be cleaned up according to their last communication of September 5th by the end of October. And any abatement properties that we would have.
So there's 22 altogether.
There's about 22 altogether, 20 to 22.
So Cal Recycle will be doing that abatement as well.
Yes.
Okay.
We have not brought those forward yet. We're waiting for a timeline of them actually getting here because we've been postponed often for the last 6 months. So once we have a firm timeline, then we'll bring those abatement properties forward.
Any further questions? Any questions from the public on this item?
Public Services Director, if I can just get ensure that you understand there's an impact at the landfill. That's the end of the road there. The delay with this by the state pushes us up against the rain season, which means we're accepting fire debris, and we also need to prepare the landfill for the rainy season. So If there's any assistance we can get to push that, great. But I just wanted to make sure that was heard. It is a frustration that we're near the very end of the season, doing this from the previous year. And my staff, we need to prepare that landfill. We have a lot of work to do to get it ready for the rain season, and this is just an additional impact. Has nothing to do with public health. I appreciate their work. It's the state.
So when you're saying you'd appreciate assistance, what does that look like?
We've been hearing, we're in contact with the contractor who's supposedly doing the work, and it's, okay, it's a month out. It's next, then a month out. All right, well, it's a month out again. So I'm hopeful that this is maybe a more definite timeline that it is starting. But the more we push up against the rain season, for us to be accepting fire debris during the rain season while at the same time trying to prepare for water quality, that's a big concern.
Okay, so that's a good point. What's the deadline? Like, what do you need to, when do you need to have it done by in order to not impede your operation over there?
Typically, we go by the grading season, that
October
15th, exactly.
Okay.
That's a good deadline.
So, and again, you're waiting on 17 that are going to be done on there voluntarily, and 5 that need to be abated.
3 to 5, I'm not sure of that
Okay,
exact
but up to
number,
5.
But up
Could
to
be.
5.
Okay.
And there's 17 that are already committed in this phase 2.
Okay, but they're not done.
They are not, they haven't
And
even
they're
started.
waiting on Cal Recycle.
Correct.
At what point do we tell Cal Recycle, either need to do it or we do it, and we got to get it done?
That's a good question. I do not have that information. I would
Okay.
need the EH director's input on that.
Okay, so what I would suggest that you do is you make a call to them with Lars involved in that call, and explain, if you haven't already, maybe you need to.
Sure.
And explain to them what the situation is, and that we need to step it up somehow or another, because that is it's not like you can dedicate just part of the landfill for this, and we'll get to that later. It's all got to be done.
Right.
There's a system that has to be done up there in order to be compliant, because we've seen what this, it's interesting that the state agency is holding us up, while another state agency is waiting to pounce on us if we don't do it right.
Exactly.
So-
That is a concern.
Yeah, we're a little caught here. So I do understand that they were waiting for some environmental assessments on their Section 106 cultural resource recommendations. They've been asked for GIS files, which Tetra Tech is supplying to the state in order to wrap up this permitting process.
Okay. Is there a way to make a call so Lars can be involved in that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sooner than later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Sabatier.
And I'd like to make a suggestion, just because it seems to have been helpful when Supervisor Crandall and I have been on the phone with state agencies. If you have a supervisor in the room, they tend to listen a little bit better too for having that person in the room. It's just kind of weird, but that's how it works. So if we can help you and you want to invite 1 or 2 of us to that table to help out and make sure the state does what they need to do, I would say please invite 1 or 2 of us to be at that meeting as well.
Do either one of you have a preference?
Well, it should be the supervisor whose district is impacted
Which would be-
first.
You mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have the landfill.
Right, so both? Okay.
I wouldn't mind being part of the phone call.
I'll set up that conference call.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment? Seeing no movement, I'll bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, I move to continue, to approve the continuation of a local health emergency and order, let me start over. I make a motion to approve the continuation of a local health emergency and order prohibiting the endangerment of the community through the unsafe removal, transportation, and disposal of fire debris for the Mendocino Complex fire.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Board.
Our 6.5 item, 9:30 a.m., discussion and direction about seeking to offer voters the ability to vote on a sales tax measure to improve roads. I believe this is Supervisor Sabatier and Simon.
Start or?
Scott's coming right
Oh, Scott's coming up.
All right. So no surprise and no secret that our roads are not in adequate shape. And so we've tried in the past to find ways to resolve our road issues. I know that recently we've had the SB1 pass, which gives us more funding. But when we look at the 10-year prognosis of where will we be with our roads, our current PCI, and I'm going to let Director De Leon take over at one point. He's got a whole lot more details than I do, but our current PCI is at 37. If we continue with the funding that we have, which includes the CPI index increases, we will still not hit 50 PCI within 10 years. We have a lot of projects through community development that we hope to bring a lot of visitors to Lake County with, and to continue with the same quality of roads, not only for those coming into our community, but those who live in our community, is not a positive outcome for those who live here and our businesses. As I stated on the memo, it costs about $500 to $1,000 each year for car owners for the damage done to their car because of the road quality that we have. And of course, that doesn't mean you're spending $500 to $1,000 a year, but you're losing the life longevity of your car, and it's going to be damaged earlier than it should. So we need to do something about our roads. We tried passing a measure for 1.5% tax in the recent years. That did not pass, and that was a general tax. And what we heard very loud and clear was it needs to be specific, and it needs to go to something that we all want to see change. And roads is the constant factor that we hear from our constituents, that they want to see better roads. Our transit system, our emergency personnel, our residents, everybody is affected and has higher costs of maintenance due to the roads. So we would like to open up a discussion about the possibility of looking at a sales tax measure specifically for roads, which means that we are recommending we look at getting the 2/3 threshold rather than the general 50% threshold of votes. And at the minimum, we would be looking at potentially putting it on a 2020 November ballot. That way we can go ahead and survey our community and see what kind of level of support we would have, because we don't just want to throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. We want to be well prepared and do the right process in order to know that this is something that we have support in our community. But I think that we need to we've seen, from my perspective, I've seen what Measure V has done for the city of Clear Lake. We are seeing drastic measures and drastic changes, and because we have a plan for a specific use of sales tax funds going directly to the roads in the city of Clear Lake, within 10 to 15 years, we will be at an 85 PCI, which is going to be amazing in comparison to where we came from. So I think that we can see the value of it. I know Ukiah also passed a small, but still a sales tax measure for their roads, and their roads have also increased. And so I think when it's utilized in the proper way, and if it's a specific tax, it has to be utilized in the proper way, that we can see some positive changes happening in the future. So I just want to open that up. I'll let Supervisor Simon continue.
Yeah, Bruno said almost everything that needed to be said. Since I came on the board, obviously road conditions are something that I was made aware of right off the bat. I know I've had continual conversations with Scott, and I think one of the eye-opener things is, once you get under 25, then really you should be probably peeling that pavement off and just going to dirt. And we have a lot of those roads. A lot of the calls that we get, especially in the unincorporated areas around the county, are just people getting into their homes. You talked about the $500 to $1,000 a year. That is definitely realistic. I come from some experience, obviously, on the tribal side. We just recently got roads paved about 10 years ago. And yeah, the costs are exorbitant on your ball joints, your tires, everything else that you're going through there. And then you also have a lot of elderly folks that are living on these roads. They're having some tough times. We get a lot of calls. I know Public Works is looking at some different ideas, how to stretch the dollars even farther on some initial projects he's looking to do, which I think is great. I think they're doing some of the same stuff in Clear Lake, so I think it is a unique opportunity. The failed tax measure that we attempted to go with the sales tax, I heard it loud and clear from the community. If it's a specific need for the community, then I think we have a good chance of doing it. I think there's a lot of hard work, taxing our way out of things isn't the best way, but I think for our overall economic success in this county, I think would be a good investment and a good opportunity, at least to have the discussion. And I know we're gonna get pushback, but we will also hopefully provide the information that's needed to get us down the road to make a positive decision for the county for long term. So that's my thoughts on it.
And I just want to add real quick, I did have a conversation with Director De Leon yesterday, and I know in the city of Clear Lake, this was one of the key items that needed to be part of the tax measure for people to really support it, is to also offer a sunset clause, so this is not a perpetual tax that lasts forever. So 10 years, 20 years, something along those lines. I would prefer and recommend 20 years, which would mimic what the city of Clear Lake has done to ensure that we can get us to a certain level of PCI. And PCI, sorry, I've been using the term, but it's pavement condition index. It's to state the level of quality of the road. And I think that once we reach a certain level, maintenance is so much cheaper. I don't want to say cheaper. It costs so much less to maintain a quality road than it is to maintain a really bad road.
Supervisor Brown.
So I heard the two supervisors talk about the last election, but is that as far back as you went? Because this has already been done.
Right.
Tried.
Right.
And that's what we need to do, go back and find out historically. I think it's been twice in the last 20 years that we did a road tax, and one for just the lake. There were specific taxes that weren't general, those three. At least two of them, there may have been three, I'm not really sure. Do you remember if we did the road tax twice or once?
I don't specifically recall a road tax. I was prepared to bring one to your board.
Jerry Shaw did one.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it was before me. We attempted 3 lake taxes.
It wasn't 20 years ago, because it's been since I've been on the.
There was one that was proposed but never actually placed on the ballot,
There was one on the ballot, and,
or at least in the recent years.
yeah, we'll find out, because it's kind of interesting. You talk about the city of Clear Lake and them getting their sales tax, and they've done really good with it. They're a self-help community or city or municipality, and so they're able to qualify for grants, is what we would do. But again, it's been a while, but if I remember right, these county taxes are voted on also by the cities, and the two cities are what killed us.
I don't believe that this would go to the city jurisdictions. This would be only unincorporated.
So that law changed, Supervisor Brown, that law
Okay.
changed a couple of years ago.
That hurt us in that. It was,
Right.
And then the other thing that you talked about, and I may be wrong on this too, because the laws do change. When you say we need to, I don't remember your exact words, but basically it was poll the community and find out if they would support this. I think we're limited on what we can do and how much money we can spend. There has to be funds spent outside. We can't spend money on that.
Right.
From what I understand. Is that correct?
And
To support a sales tax.
there is the possibility of funding being available through the APC for doing such a survey.
Okay.
They've done that in the past,
Yeah,
and
they have.
it's been a request that we've already passed through the board.
Okay. Yeah, the APC would have funding for that. They did that actually on the one that Jerry Shaw had worked on as well. So those, I think it's important to go back to find out historically what happened, what didn't happen, and where the votes were and where they weren't.
Right.
So there was some polling that was done back then too. And I don't think anything's different, other than the roads have gotten worse. So.
And more
Anita, did you want to
expensive.
chime in?
Yes, you can't use public funds for purposes of campaigning. Vote for this or else, or vote for this or Armageddon. What you can do is expend public funds to collect information. As long as it's unbiased, unpositioned information, where you're just checking to see what people's thoughts are, and/or to tell them what a particular ballot measure will accomplish if they pass it. That's an impartial statement.
Can you poll with it?
It depends upon the poll, but if the poll is just to see for support rather than attempting to cajole or convince or persuade, then it's not campaigning, so that should still be okay.
And one of the things that, that I would say on my behalf is, I'll say the same thing, that's why I know this happened before, because I said this before. A yes vote on this, on moving forward with this, is not a yes vote on a sales tax. It's a yes vote on letting the voters decide whether or not they want one. That's the thing that's really important, because we'll all get accused of, you guys want to tax us more, you want to tax us more. That's not what this is about. This is about letting the voters decide whether or not they want a tax. If they don't want it, they don't want it. If they do, then that's good too. So that's my position on it.
And today's discussion is to say, do we go forward in finding out if we go ahead with a survey and then it comes back to us and we can make the exact decision, because we have to approve the actual ballot measure and what it says on there, what the percentage of the tax would be, so on and so forth. If it's a specific or a general tax, if it has a sunset clause, we would have to go over those items.
Right.
But the surveys would help us identify what are the most supported items.
And the APC, if I could jump in on that, the APC was reluctant to approve an appropriation for the polling until they heard from all of your board and whether you supported moving forward with such an effort. So again, to echo, today's discussion is really more for do we go back to the APC and say the board supported moving forward or not?
Right.
And there's a lot of work yet to be done in deciding if your board moves forward, then there will be an opportunity to come back to decide a lot of the specifics.
Is there anything further from the board before I open up to public comment? I will open up to public comment.
The only thing I'd like to hear from Scott
Oh,
is you got a PowerPoint presentation up there?
I
If you
do,
had some
I
stuff
do
you could add
have a
in.
couple of slides, and I think it would be important to provide a little context. And so the slides, I'm gonna walk through these a little bit.
So,
And,
yeah, no.
you know, Supervisor Sabatier mentioned SB1, and while SB1 has provided additional revenues and has been frankly a godsend for our department, I wanted to point out a couple of things. And if you look at the graph and this bottom line right here, this bottom line would be the funding that we would have, or this bottom line reflects the PCI using the funding that we had without SB1. So had SB1 not been approved, this would have been the mark of our payment condition index, starting up here at 37, and in 10 years we would be at 25, which is failed. So in 10 years, the entire road network would be at 25 and we'd be failed, again, without SB1. The middle line represents, using the funding from SB1, what our projected PCI numbers are going to be with that funding. And you can see that it will go up, 43 projected in 10 years. We're starting at 37, 38, so I'll say modest improvement, but we're basically holding the system together. We're not making any significant improvements, and we're basically holding the system together. If we added additional funding, this would be funding that we would need to get to a PCI of 50. That funding is again the missing piece, and the point of this graph is to show that with the SB1 funds that we currently have, we still are not going to be able to reach a payment condition index of 50. If you could go to the next one, please. All right, so this slide will require a little bit of explanation. And again, it's a measure of funding requirements based on different payment condition indexes. So this line right here would represent the funding requirements, and here's your funding in millions of dollars annually, and this is the years across the bottom. This line that I'm highlighting is the funding needed per year to achieve a PCI of 50. Just For illustration purposes, I used a PCI of 70, which would be the majority of the system in good condition. And these are the numbers that we would need annually in order to achieve a PCI of 70 at year 10. This bottom line represents the funding that we anticipate from SB1. And what I did with this line is, should your board pursue a sales tax measure, and should the voters of Lake County approve, and this number represents a 1% increase in sales tax, this would be the projected PCI that we could achieve with that additional level of funding. So we would be above a 50 PCI at the end of year 10. We would not be up in a PCI of 70, but we would be above 50, which would be a significant improvement. To put some things in perspective, the total funding shortfall between the funding that we currently have and the funding that we would need for a PCI of 50 after a 10-year period is $15.2 million. That's the shortfall that we currently have. And again, just for perspective purposes, the total funding shortfall to achieve an overall PCI of 70 over the 10-year period is $74 million. So the system is in bad shape. We're doing everything we can to hold it together, but as you can see, some additional funding here would certainly be helpful in order for us to make widespread system improvements to the road network in the county. So with that, be happy to try to answer any questions. And I also would like to thank Supervisor Sabatier for initiating this discussion. I appreciate it very much, and the department will do anything that we can do to move this along. So we thank you for that.
I'm going to get the lights. Is there any public comment on this? If you could come up and state your name, and then you have 3 minutes.
Joan Moss. I would like to know for sure, when you hand out the survey, that you explain to the public what is meant by SBI and PCI, and a PCI of 70 and a PCI of 50. I'm a layperson. I appreciate Mr. De Leon's filling up the potholes on my Wildcat Road. But I think that the public, and I'm part of the public, I don't know what SBI is, what bill it was, and what it did. I think we are we are a poor county. And putting the burden on the taxpayers to pay for their own road improvement is one alternative. The other alternative is to contact the representatives, the government representatives, and ask them to change the law that does exist. It's my understanding that the law that does exist depends on how many people exist in an area. And that's why the Bay Area gets all the money to fix all the roads, because there's more people. But we have a big expanse. We are rural, and we have low-income people. And I hope that what you send out in the survey explains those things. And I would like Mr. De Leon to explain SB1 and PCI right now, because I don't know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, SB1 was a measure that was approved by the state of California that raised the gas tax to provide additional funding for road repairs. And the additional money that was raised goes into an account called the RMRA, Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation account. And those funds are dispersed as stated. There's a formula that all gas tax money follows, the state uses to disperse those funds, and it's based on maintained miles and the number of registered vehicles in your area. And while it's true that the urban areas are receive more benefit, they also have more people, and they also have more cars.
And more representatives.
And more representatives, and they're also the ones buying the most of the fuel. So
Yeah.
while rural areas receive less money, it's could be argued it's proportionate to certainly the number of people that are buying fuel, and it's proportionate to the amount of fuel that's purchased statewide. That formula has been something that's been in place for a number of years, and I can tell you that it was not arrived at through a small amount of effort. There was a lot of politics involved with the formation of that formula. And frankly, to reopen that, I suspect would not bode well for small rural communities. And I suspect that that if that were to be reopened and reanalyzed, that the rural agencies would probably not, we would probably fare worse than we are today. The second question was PCI, Pavement Condition Index was what PCI stands for, and it is a measure of basically the quality of your road. Below 25 is a road that's considered failed. I don't have committed to memory each of the breakdowns, but I'll be happy to provide that information if you need that. But it's a scale of 0 to 100 that measures the quality of the road.
And I think we would do our due diligence to educate the public if we were to go forward with this tax measure about what it could bring to Lake County. Also with the fact that SB1 has, if you're a self-help county, you can get more of those funds.
There are some options, or there are some things available through SB1 if you are a self-help county, if you have a specific transportation tax. There are some programs that are available to only those agencies that have those specific taxes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I just wanted to add that law just came in, 2018, I think it started, the SB1, maybe 2017. And then Prop 6 that we voted on in 2018 in November, it was voted no on, which means SB1 continues. So this is a fairly new law to add additional funding for roads. We're fortunate that we actually have access to the funds that we do. I know that our Assembly member, Cecilia Aguiar Curry, fought for rural areas to get a larger chunk of those funds, and she got her way, and we were able to get additional funding because of that. So I think that asking to change something that was just changed that adds additional funds, at this moment in time, we need to figure out how to use those funds properly, which we are, and then also to figure out how do we make sure that we help ourselves to create the community that we want to see, so that we don't have to complain about our roads, because we're using all the money that we're receiving, whether it's through the gas tax or the HUDA or the SB1 funds, it's all going to the roads right now, and this is unfortunately all that we can do.
Where can a member of the public find out who determines the PCI of our roads? How can we go find out what the PCI is and who does judge the roads? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
I was going to get interrupted, but I just wanted to know who judges the PCI and determines the PCI.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I can answer that. The county is in contract with a company called NCE. They're the preeminent consulting firm in the state of California that does pavement evaluations. And they do an update for us every 2 to 3 years. And the numbers that I used for the graphs are from the 2018 Pavement Management Program update that they prepared for us. I can show it to you. We don't have extra copies, but I'll see if there's a way that I can get you to something there.
Is there any further public comment on this item? Okay, seeing no movement, then I'll bring it back to the board.
I believe we're just looking for direction
Direction.
today, not necessarily a motion. And I'm nodding my head that I would like to move forward.
I agree that we need to bring this to the voters and let them make the determination.
We got a long ways to go before we bring it to the voters.
Right.
Well,
But let's get that process
Let's start
started.
Yes.
So if I may, just to inquire then, since Mr. De Leon indicated that the APC was waiting to assure there was board support before initiating a survey, what you're doing today is by consensus evincing your support that they move forward with that and with the process as a whole.
yes,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
thank you. Thank you, Scott.
All right, thank you.
Scott.
Actually, why don't you stay there, and we'll do the 7.4? That's yours, right? Consideration of change order number 1 for Clerk Drive pavement repair project, federal project number BRLS 5914025, bid number 18-24, for an increase of $2,251.15 for a revised contract amount of $299,578,000.15.
Good morning. Yes, this is change order number 1, and it is a balancing change order to address actual final in-place quantities. This project was part of the the bridge replacement project. We used Clark Drive as a detour during the bridge construction on Soda Bay Road, and we asked the state for funding to help repair Clark Drive after the construction traffic or the bypass traffic was done using it. And again, this is a balancing final in-place quantity change order. And if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public on this item? See no movement, I'll bring it back to the board.
This would be your district, right? Or is yours?
No, it's Tina's.
Okay.
So if somebody, that's good.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve Board of Seat change order number 1, and that the board authorize the chair to execute said change order for an increase of $2,251.15 and a revised contract amount of $299,578.15.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And our 7.5, consideration and presentation of the flood insurance assessment for unincorporated Lake County for 2019.
Okay, I'll be brief on this. This is actually it's part of our community rating system program that we come to your board with periodic updates. We are in the middle of an audit through the CRS program at the moment, and so this is timely that we come to your board with, again, just a short presentation on our assessment of the flood insurance in the county. I did not prepare any slides, but if you would turn to the memorandum that I prepared for this item, you're going to notice the flood insurance assessment, and basically the tables, the information that's in those tables was provided by FEMA. It is a snapshot in time of the number of homes that have insurance. The date of that was April of 2000 or April of 19. So you know, it can change, but again, this is a snapshot in time of where we were in April of 2019. Some takeaways that are important to note from this is that based on FEMA's information, there are 5,118 buildings that are currently in what's called the special flood hazard area or the floodplain in Lake County. We don't have a breakdown of how many of those are outbuildings and whatnot, but what we do know is that a total of 1,253 of them have flood insurance, or 21% is the percentage of insurance coverage, which is frankly quite low. We have a lot of repetitive loss projects or properties which have been identified. And I think as a goal for our department, between now and the next audit and our next presentation to your board, which will probably be 5 years from now, we've got some work to do with outreach, and we need to really try to hammer home with folks that they need to have their properties insured. I'd like to see, and this is an extremely ambitious goal, but I'd like to see at least half of those homes or those structures have insurance. I think that'd be a more appropriate number. And the other thing that I'd like for us to tackle as a department are these repetitive loss properties. I am aware that many years ago there was a grant available for doing mitigations to repetitive loss properties, and I think we need to be looking for any and all opportunities to try to work with those people to do whatever type of work we could do to get them out of that repetitive loss category. Again, it's going to be a short presentation. In closing, I'd like to recognize Yulia Osatrova, who is in our water resources staff, and she is our water resources engineer, and she was the one that prepared the report for us today. And so I would like to recognize Yulia for the fine work that she did. And if you have any questions, she or I will attempt to answer them.
Okay. Supervisor Sabatier.
Thank you for that report, and I'm happy to hear what you said about the repetitive issue of the same areas constantly being hit with floods. I think that's an important one, not only for the houses that are there currently, but if they get damaged enough, they're probably going to want to rebuild at one point too, and so we need to really look at the protection for the future, and I don't know what that looks like, but I would suspect that FEMA itself would have some grant abilities for them not having to pay out on insurance that we're forced to get. So I think that I like hearing that. Thank you very much.
Any further questions before I open up to the public? Is there any public comments or questions on this item? Okay. Seeing no movement, I'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Simon.
I just want to make a comment on, Scott, good job. I know this was going on as you were asked to take over, the new position there. So appreciate that, stepping in and getting this done. I know they're out in the community. I know there were some folks that were asking, what's going on? Why are we doing this? But the ultimate goal, obviously, is to protect our communities as much as possible and our residents, but also to make sure that we can keep that 15% discount that individuals are. Is it at 15%
It's
still?
15%.
It's at 15%, and making sure that that stays in place. And it looks like we have a good opportunity here with the increased direct mailings, direct contact with those areas who are affected. So all the things that are suggested in the memo, I think, is the right direction. And ultimately, with the formation of the Risk Reduction Authority, this may open up another opportunity for us to go for FEMA funding or something else that might be able to help with community outreach. I don't know, but it is, it's a risk that we always deal with, and so I think it's a good time. So thank you very much for all the hard work in your department, keeping our communities safe, especially in some of the new rebuilds that we have after the fire. Anderson Springs being one of those, and down by the south side of Middletown. I think those are all opportunities to make the people aware that, I know we're rebuilding from fire, but flood very well could happen also.
And since you raised it, Supervisor Simon, that audit and the work that we're doing with FEMA and others on our CRS rating is ongoing, and we'll continue to work with them and shore up any shortcomings that we have and in the processes, and we're continuing to work with them on that. This is a part of that effort.
Excellent. If there's anything further, this was an information-only item.
Thank
So
you
I
very
thank you
much.
very much for that. With that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll take up our 7.3 item, industrial hemp. All right, before we take up our 7.3 item, we're quickly going to take up our 5.3 item, adopt resolution amending resolution number 2018-118, establishing temporary alternative office hours for county office located in and around surrounding the Lake County Courthouse. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Matthew.
My name is Matthew Rothstein, Deputy County Administrative Officer. As you'll recall, in August of 2018, your board instituted a 6-month initial pilot of Friday closures of offices in the county courthouse and some of the surrounding buildings. That move actually brought us into alignment with longstanding practices in the city of Lakeport and the city of Clear Lake of having the public offices be closed on Fridays. The county departments surveyed and also some local businesses have reported that adjustments have been made. The Friday closures are fairly well adopted by the community at this point in time. Administration has received very few complaints from the public, and in each of those cases, it was something that could be mitigated fairly readily. In December of 2018, your board affirmed your strong support of policy changes to help departments manage our fiscal and staffing crises through the passage of the Fiscal Crisis Management Plan, and you also reauthorized reduced public hours on March 12, 2019. And you may recall that the public closures were initially started in response to staff vacancy rates. At that time, the staff vacancy rates were around 20%. Currently, we're at 22%, as Carol mentioned earlier, and HR staff have reported that recently the vacancy rates have hovered around 25%. So the problem persists that started this Friday closure. Departments have also reported benefits, including greater productivity, opportunities to catch up on reporting and other tasks that benefit from uninterrupted focus, and there's been more protected time for staff meetings and trainings as well. And as you're aware, county departments are also committed to staying in communication with your board. And if there is a compelling business reason for a department to be open on a Friday, multiple departments have expressed that they're willing to work with your board to do that when appropriate. So the resolution before your board today authorizes Friday closures for the county offices through March 10, 2020. And I wanted to also call your attention to the resolution on page 3. There was an error with the date. That has already been addressed and corrected by staff, so the final version that your board will sign will reflect the correct date that the closures will extend through March 10, 2020.
Is there any questions for Matthew? Supervisor Sabatier.
And I just wanted to bring up that I appreciate why we're at this
Mike,
junction.
is your mic on?
It was not on. I appreciate why we're at this junction when you don't have enough staff to be at the counters to deal with the public. It's nice to have that one day to be able to get all the jobs done at your desk because it's not just about filling out paperwork, it's about processing the paperwork afterwards. And I also appreciate that we're looking at this every 6 months rather than just kind of setting no expiration date because I get a lot of complaints about Fridays you're not open for business and I'm always curious, how much are we potentially losing by not being open to the public on Fridays? But one of the things that I wanted to suggest, and I think is available already to department heads to do, when certain functions occur, let's say property taxes are due, it would be nice if that office can be open on Fridays as well. When we have an election, it would be nice if our registrar of voters could be open on those Fridays as well. So not continuously for months on end, but during specific times where we're supposed to get a little bit more foot traffic from engagement from the public for certain activities. I just want to reiterate that there is the possibility that you can open your office on Fridays just to make those accommodations. And I think that we should try to accommodate as much as we can. And hopefully we can get past this 23% vacancy rate so we don't have to have this Friday closure. So that'll be on us to make changes so that the vacancy rates can change. And hopefully that will happen in the near future. But for now, let's try to be flexible when there's a need for more people to come and get the service that we're offering.
Supervisor Brown?
So, again, I know staff, there's a lot of reasons why we did this, and I also know that that the Friday is used as a 3-day weekend for people. So I'd like to know exactly, how much of that's being used. And I know people, they get days off, that's fine. But if the whole purpose, if we're telling the public, the purpose of closing that office is so we can get caught up on the work throughout the week, and then the employees are actually not even there to do that work, we need to know that too. And it's not widespread, but it's enough, I've seen it enough to where, we should address it and find out what's really going on. Because, I don't like the idea of being closed to the public anyway, unless we really are legitimately getting caught up without having the public, always at the window of some of these different departments. But I also know that it's used as a 3-day weekend.
And I know that I've experienced offices doing 4/10s instead of 5/8s, and it's just 4/8s as far as I'm concerned. You don't get the extra 2 hours of hard work to equate to 5 days worth of work. It depends the personality, it depends the person, but typically you get tired at one point in your day, and I think 8 hours is an adequate amount of time, and I would
It's
prefer.
usually about 5 minutes to 11 for me, but I'm willing to go on today, so.
Supervisor Crandall.
So I just wanted to touch base on one, is Bruno had brought up a lot of points about tax and other departments. But one for me is an appealable situation from a community development standpoint. I know that there was a recent constituent that had a use permit and had stated that he wasn't able to file his appeal on Friday. I'm not sure if that's whether it's true or not, but either way, if we can make sure that some sort of, remedy is in place to make sure that if he can make the contact with whoever in that department, and then also either follow through with something a day after or before, just making sure that something's done to get their appeal in if it's on a Friday, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Or don't make the appeals be deadline Friday.
Right.
Okay, I'll open up to public. Is there any public comments or questions on this item?
Joan Moss. I was paying property taxes, and there was a line, a long line, up on the 3rd floor. And Maria Valdez called Public Services, and they brought over chairs. There were senior citizens having to wait over an hour to pay their property taxes, and I was one of them. So I believe that there should be flexibility. As Mr. Sabatier said, Supervisor Sabatier said, on the days that property taxes are due, I think it was on Monday, if half of those people had been able to pay them Friday, there wouldn't have been it wasn't a traffic jam, it was a people jam. And there were many, many lines all day long for people to write their property tax checks. So I'm for getting flexible and using, pragmatism. I think it's terrible that tourists cannot visit the museum on Sunday. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing no movement, I'll bring it back to the board for action. Offer the resolution.
Madam Chair, I move to approve consent agenda item 5.3.
Resolutions,
Oh.
offer the resolution.
Resolution's been offered.
Please call roll.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, we will then move on to thank you, Matthew. Our 7.3 item, discussion and consideration of A, the initial draft of an ordinance amending specified sections of Article 1 of Chapter 3 of the Lake County Code relating to agriculture and plant production pertaining to industrial hemp, and B, formation of ad hoc committee to consider making recommendations to industrial hemp regulations. Thank you, Stephen.
Good morning.
Hi. You guys have a copy of what it is, right?
Yes.
So is there any discussion? Want me to read it?
Is there anything you want to highlight in it, or?
I'll be brief. In there is the surety bond requirement, which I want to have, so the county's not stuck paying the bill. Seed production of industrial hemp would be only indoors. Growers would know that we have the ability to go on their property during normal hours to take inspections whenever we want to. And if the inspection comes back positive for THC above the limit, that they would pay for that test and the destruction of the crop. Anyone who had male plants in the county of hemp would have to rogue their fields to remove those plants if they're going to go after the seed producers. then they should grow their own plants. The grower has to notify the ag commissioner if they're growing cannabis on the property. We run across people who are using the hemp program, frankly, as a shield for a cannabis operation. If any plants come into the county, that we're allowed to inspect the plants for bugs, diseases, like we do other ag commodities. And if they didn't plant, they need to let us know so we don't anticipate testing during that season. And that's about it, so as far as highlights go.
Anita.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm sure Mr. Hajic would agree with this. I put this into ordinance form for the Ag Commissioner, but what your board's been presented with is a very initial draft.
Yeah.
There's obviously a great deal of definition, process, procedure that's going to have to be added. I think what he wanted to do was present certain bullet points that reflect his recommendations to you, and get your review and input and direction so that then he can move forward.
Thank you. Supervisor Sabatier.
So a couple of things. The destruction, I know you have the surety bond in there. Can we specify what kind of destruction happens? Because for some reason in my mind, automatically I thought, oh, they're going to burn their plants, but in October, September, we don't want anybody burning anything. Could we put in there specifically that you must chip, mulch, whatever, just destroy in another way other than using fire, just so that we can make sure that that's not the case? I know that I was looking up at UC Davis has a standard for growing hemp. I forget the CCIA or something like that. I forget what the title of it is. But they say when you find a male plant, the standard is to get rid of the 10-foot radius area that they're found in. And I'd like to use that standard as well. That way, whatever it's touched is not going to be affected as well, not just the one plant itself. And I think that, again, it creates bigger incentive to make sure to watch your plants and make sure that you catch things in time. I love the fact that we placed seed cultivators indoors. I think that protects not only cannabis, but other hemp growers who are not wanting to get seeds into their crop. And there is one thing that was just brought to my attention, and I just did some quick research, and I haven't done enough to say that I'm 100% with what I'm about to say, but it's an issue. And so maybe we want to look at the definition of industrial hemp. Right there it says it's defined as cannabis sativa. Now I'm going to flip over to our cannabis ordinance. The definition of cannabis is all parts of the plant cannabis sativa. And then I go over to our measure C, which is actually right here, and measure C says tax cannabis. And so I feel like we need to define industrial hemp as maybe it can be cannabis sativa of less than 0.3% THC. Like if we can be specific that you could own, this is the plant that you can grow, anything above that would not be industrial hemp. I think if we add that specificity, then we get away from possible issues and combining different rules and regulations. That's all I have at this moment in time. I'd love to hear what the public has to say.
Okay. Anita.
Just in light of what Supervisor Sabatier was saying, as jurisdictions are working on industrial hemp ordinances, I believe they're much more in line with what Supervisor Sabatier is saying. One in San Benito, for example, provides that industrial hemp means a crop that is limited to types of the plant cannabis sativa L, having no more than 0.3% tetrahydrocannabinol, because I'm sure that wasn't right, THC, contained in the dried flowering tops, whether growing or not, the seeds of the plant, the resin extracted from any part of the plant, and every compound, manufacture, salt derivative, mixture, or preparation of the plant, its seeds or resins produced therefrom. So but it all is following the limitation of the 1% that I've seen in other places.
Right. I do have one further question. I've been seeing a bunch of different hemp farms, and is it through ag or is it through community development that we would be placing setbacks from perimeter of a parcel?
I would say if you're talking about setbacks for ag protections, it would be ours. I believe, but if it was revolving schools and residences, that'd be
Right.
community development. But if it
And
was,
the setbacks I'm speaking of are, for instance, neighboring properties that the hemp farms are going all the way to the property line at the fence line versus having a little bit of a setback in between.
if it's an order issue and those kind of rules, I think it would be community development. But if you were trying to protect cannabis from hemp, then that'd be ours. Because it's more ag-related, but that's just my opinion.
Supervisor Brown?
I just, what are you talking about for setbacks though, Bruno? I'm not sure, clear on what it
Like
is.
a 20-foot setback, 50-foot setback
for what
from the
purpose?
perimeter of the property. Like I don't see vineyards necessarily going all the way to the neighboring property. There's usually a little roadway around the perimeter.
But that's an operational issue that they decide on their own. There's no,
Okay. So
there's no
there's no-
ordinance on that.
Okay.
Don't we make sometimes vineyards have setbacks though from property lines? I mean, or is that a?
It's not very
No, it's an
common.
operational issue. It's where, so they can drive up and down and around that. But I'm just clear, we have to, if you're going to ask for a setback, you're going to be clear on why that setback's there. He mentioned odor issue. You can set it back 20 feet, you can set it back 40 feet. It's not going to make any difference. The odor issue is still there.
Right.
So, we need to identify why it is, that we're asking for a specific thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm just asking why you should.
Just from my visual experience, I don't
Yeah.
have any practical experience. It just seemed like there's usually a setback when it comes to ag, and I think it's the practicality of being able
Being able to drive around it.
your
Yeah.
perimeter, and I wasn't seeing that on some of those, and so need to do a little bit more research on the laws that we're applying to others.
Is there anything further from the board before I open it to public? Seeing none, I'll open up to public comment. If you could state your name and then limit it to 3 minutes.
Rob Shergis. I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but I believe it said enclosed area, whereas the Ag Commissioner and Bruno just said indoors. And that could, if it's an enclosed greenhouse, that seems as if it'd be sufficient for enclosed. And that could be important if they want to use the natural light spectrum from the sun. And it'd be a lot cheaper than putting the indoor breeding for seed production.
And I'll just read that part right there. It says, industrial hemp seed production shall only occur in a completely enclosed structure designed to prevent pollen from spreading to other areas. And I agree with how it's written.
Good morning. My name is Raymond Hausnick, and I have a small cannabis farm outdoor in Kelseyville. And what we're talking about right now, I agree that as far as seed production, it should be limited to indoors so it doesn't cross-pollinate the cannabis growers in the community. We've done a lot to follow the rules and do it the right way, and to have a product like this, hemp, as far as cross-pollination goes, it's not fair on any level at all. So I just wanted to say that we're, like I said, a really small farm, and if we were to get pollinated this year, it would be devastating to me and my family. And already on our street, there's two, probably, 10 to 20 acre farms that I've already seen male plants growing in there. So just not to not have any rules for them, it just doesn't seem fair at all for the cannabis farmers that are trying to do this the right way and grow a crop that's not seeded from an outside influence. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, that I think you guys should really have more rules as far as the hemp production is concerned, and maybe it can just be clones or feminized seeds, and if people want to do the cross-pollination and make seeds, that it is enclosed, or so yeah, I just wanted to say that because I the amount of revenue that you guys are going to make as far as taxes off of the cannabis community too, I would think you guys would like to protect that asset as far as if farms do, like me, for example, if we got pollinated, I don't know next year if we would be able to do this whole process again. So it just doesn't, it's not fair. I don't think it's fair at all to have these type of things in place. And I'm not against farming or agriculture at all, because I actually want to do hemp. And I know people that are doing hemp, and they're doing clone only or feminized seeds, and they're actually producing it for oil, and it's not seed production. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about the hemp that's being planted in the county. So thank you.
Thank you, Raymond.
So I got a couple
Supervisor
questions.
Brown?
So based on that presentation, I think maybe there's some that expect that after today, we're going to take care of all this. Well, whatever's in the ground is in the ground. So no, let me finish. Any ordinance that we're going to adopt is going to take some time, and it's not going to, we're not going to go out and destroy hemp gardens tomorrow, in other words, so.
I understand.
Okay. So, and the other thing that I wanted to ask Steve, because you mentioned there are some hemp gardens that are shielding cannabis grows. We're aware of that?
I am.
Yeah, and the sheriff's department's involved in that?
Yeah.
Okay. And the destruction, I didn't know if that was a secret or not, but.
I don't want to advertise it, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it should be. We should advertise it. That's, if that's a deterrent from people doing the wrong thing, I think it should be advertised.
And that's why,
So,
and that's why I wanted.
yeah, but let them advertise it.
Well, yeah, but that's
yeah,
what I
got it.
wanted, when they sign an agreement with us, when they register,
Yeah.
they sign something that gives, that we don't
Right.
have to have a search warrant to go on their property to test that hemp
Yeah, and.
for being cannabis.
And that brings another question, because I talked to somebody from the sheriff's department that was having a hard time getting information about who was legitimate and who wasn't, so I guess that's gotten worked out since.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Not with your department, but.
No, with our departments too.
Yeah.
Because we let community development know, and the sheriff know, all the new hemp growers when they come across people.
Yeah. And then to get back to Bruno's destruction method discussion. So, and it's easy for, most people, even though Lake County is largely agriculture, most people, the majority of the people in Lake County have never been involved in ag, other than they drive by it. So it's easy to say, well, we don't want any burning in October or September. Well, there's still occasions that you could do that, but I think it needs to be approved. If there are places down in the valley that's a better method than shipping, where you're going to send stuff out in the air. It could be, I think what we should do, instead of just saying no burning, we should say a destruction method that's approved by the ag commissioner, air quality, whoever else, instead of just eliminating a method. It could be piled up and covered up and burned when the burn season comes. Sometimes that's better. Sometimes you can bury it. You can till it under. So there are things that we should consider as a whole for ag operation, as opposed to one crop is treated this way, one crop is treated this way. I think we need to keep those open, so.
I can agree with it.
Okay. All right, next.
Michael Green. I agree that there's definitely the potential for illicit cannabis cultivation being clothed in a hemp registration. That seems to be the one point of consensus everyone has in the county. It is definitely a Wild West green rush mentality right now. Most of it's focused around hemp cultivation of flower for CBD products, but there are many other products that can be produced by hemp cultivation. So when you're taking a look at this very rough draft of an ordinance, I think they're looking for some direction to staff, and there may be some very strong consensus I would see initially for definitely keeping seed breeding indoors, but the larger issue of prohibiting outdoor cultivation of seed in a cultivation license that's a talking point that you're really going to have to hammer out, because that would, for most of the hemp people growing for CBD flower, it is in their best interest to prohibit the males. For other types of hemp crops, that serves against their interest. Since most of the people are chasing the CBD rainbow right now, it's not a conflict that you're going to hear a lot about. But if you want the full range of hemp activities, that is the major talking point you would need to address, if not today, somewhere down the road when you get a recommendation from your committee. I did take the very bare bones of the draft ordinance and took some comments from Stephen and some of the other people in the industry to put a little bit of meat on the bones. So if you were to take a look at some of the talking points, it would be, are we going to prohibit outdoor seed cultivation? Are we going to allow any cultivation of males outdoor that would allow a seed crop to come forward that is not a seed breeding crop? Do we want to apply basic site standards with setbacks? And do we want to make sure they get a water board permit? We did it for cannabis. Most of these hemp registrations that have come out have not pulled their water board permits, and they are subject to an irrigated lands water board permit, not a cannabis one. So the early going in the hemp land has been very bumpy. I think what you've seen is definitely a huge amount of interest in it, and I think a lot of placeholder permits have been taken with a lot of misunderstanding about the actual requirements of the hemp program at the state level. And of course, we haven't even developed any regulations at the local level. So in the draft ordinance, I got some of the talking points. I don't know if you get there today, but I mean, you want to talk about definitions. Certainly, state definitions of cannabis and hemp are very important. There's a whole bunch of other definitions from the cannabis ordinance and the state regs we can use. Do you want to have a local permit that would be an overlay on the state registration? That would allow Stephen's office to actually kind of manage some of the information flow that goes with this, and also give you a local mechanism to revoke a hemp registration or a hemp permit. So that would be it. Do you want a local permit, or do you just want to default to the state regs? Enforcement, is it going to be all Stephen? Is it going to be a mix of code enforcement? CDD comes into the mix. And so exclusion areas like we do for cannabis. The board did talk about setbacks from schools. There may be other setbacks you want. So there's a richness to this that is every bit as rich and complicated as the cannabis ordinance. And I'm encouraged to see you're here today, but there's a lot to talk about. So whatever direction of staff you can give is great, but I think it's just going to be a starting point for a much richer discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Hi, my name's Mike Mitzel. I'm a cannabis grower, and I have some hemp permits also. I think that it's a really good starting place. That, like Mike Green said, there's definitely some details that need to be worked out. The criminal penalty part, I think, is the $500 fine is obviously like pretty low. If they're saying that they already know there's big fields of cannabis being grown as hemp, a $500 fine doesn't really seem like a good deterrent. The 6 months in jail, but if you're a corporation, like, how does that work? Like, you can do it under a business. I mean, we all see how, like, PG&E's been charged with felonies. Nobody ever really goes to jail, so it's really just a fine that you have against a corporation. $500 doesn't seem like very much. Seems like they would just pay it and
But losing your plants would.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you really never had the right to plant them in the first place. So I would like to see them at least have to pay the cannabis tax. Because if you paid the cannabis tax on 1 acre, you're looking at $50,000. So why wouldn't the fine for growing cannabis be equal to the cannabis tax? I mean, I don't know. You're growing cannabis, right? The county has a tax for cannabis. So if you get caught growing cannabis under a hemp permit, you should have to match the tax, is what I would guess. At least, maybe double the tax, like not $500. So that's what I would like to see, that if you do get caught, there needs to be like some bite to the penalty, not just a slap on the wrist. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you, Mike. Supervisor Brown?
I think the penalty should be, you're done. You had your chance. I don't care how much money you have. You're not going to buy your way out of doing the wrong thing. That you're done. You're not going to grow anything there on that property, and that person's not going to grow in the county.
And I have that in my notes, that you should be banned from both the cannabis and hemp operations. And we should have a list of people who are the bad actors. That way they don't get to try somewhere else, different property, different similar activity.
I would agree to that.
So you're
Are you-
done and a $100,000 fine is what you're saying? Or?
And I don't think, like, right now, we're talking about hemp regulations. I think it would be a separate conversation to talk about what kind of penalties if you're found not doing hemp. But I agree that we should have that conversation about how do we strengthen the penalties, both for illegal grow, well, actually, I guess it would just be illegal grow anyways, but for illegal grows. Those penalties should be reviewed, and I believe that will be coming eventually to a discussion in the near future.
Anita?
Criminal penalties that are assessed here are different, and they tend to follow the government code, which sets certain limits, but the criminal penalties would be simply one facet of this. Your board can impose further penalties as you see fit. So you're right, that would be a further discussion, and it could be had potentially in this ordinance or in a larger administrative penalty discussion.
Anything further, Supervisor Brown?
Nope.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I just wanted to address the last thing you were talking about, and there's a potential conflict there, I think, if you're going to say cannabis is illegal on one property or you didn't get a permit, with the regulations for hemp being if it's above 0.3%, then you're growing THC cannabis. And so how are you going to determine whether someone did that intentionally and fine them for growing what they thought was hemp, but maybe was above the CBD or THC limit, and then it would have to be destroyed, versus someone who's actively growing THC, cannabis, marijuana illegally? How would you be able to determine, aside if they just filed a permit?
If you have a 1.5% THC cannabis plant, you should probably switch your job.
Could we make a range where if it's, because I'm sure there has to be some sort of margin of error.
I would say if it's above 2%, you're not supposed to be above 1, or else it's automatically burned if it's above 2%.
I think it's such a new thing that there's seed breeders out there, that the verification process. I haven't seen a lot of seed breeders that actually have verified, tested, labeled seeds that are below 0.3% CBD or THC. And the other kind of conflict I'm seeing is with the CBD and THC for personal use. Is right now, for personal use, you can't grow any hemp at all, if I understand it correctly, not one plant. So if you want to grow CBD, you can grow 6 cannabis THC plants legally at home for personal use. So, and they can have as much THC or as much CBD as you want. So that's kind of a gray area to me that needs to be clarified, of how you can grow cannabis plants, 6 of them legally for personal use or medical use under the existing California law. But under the existing hemp law, you can't grow a single hemp plant. And if you want to grow CBD for a medical condition and don't want to get high from the THC right now, that's illegal to do for personal use, and I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense.
Stephen?
I'd like to answer. The state, for the minimum acres for hemp is 1/10 of 1 acre. That's the state law. And I asked the state if it's above 1% THC and a hemp test, does that make it cannabis? The answer is no. It's bad hemp. And that's what I can't figure out, because I would love to, frankly, say it's cannabis, send it somewhere else, but I can't. It's bad hemp. It's hot hemp, but it's still not considered to be cannabis by the current state regulations.
But when you're growing cannabis as a THC cannabis, and it just happens to have a low THC content and a high CBD content, then you can grow it as a cannabis plant, and you'd be taxed totally differently. And the amount of acreage you could grow is totally different. And there's just a gray conflict there. And if I could add one more thing, because you were talking during some of my 3 minutes. The other thing I'm concerned about is why seeded hemp has to be grown in greenhouses when so many other agricultural crops like corn are pollinated by the wind. And if my neighbor wants to grow GMO corn and I want to grow organic corn, there's no law that prevents him from planting something that's going to contaminate my crop right next to me. So I don't know why cannabis growers are getting this kind of special treatment in terms of making hemp growing only indoor, when it seems like the size of space that cannabis growers are growing is so small they could do it in greenhouses, where when you're growing a 20 or 40 acre hemp field and you're a seed breeder, it doesn't really make sense to do 40 acres of greenhouses. It's pretty cost prohibitive. When the cannabis growers are only doing 1 or 2 acres, they could put it all in greenhouses and protect their crops.
Okay. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
I agree.
My name's Caleb Marks. I agree about seed breeding, doing it in enclosed spaces. Thank you, Sabatier, for bringing up UC Davis and the California Crop Improvement Associations. They're currently the people who certify and came up with a list of approved seed cultivars in California. Being able to work with hemp farmers and the intersection with cannabis farmers, I think it is important to allow seed breeding to happen, to follow the state regulations, follow California Crop Improvement Association's protocols, and creating unique cultivars that will work in specific areas, specific counties is actually going to bring benefit. On the point of feminized seeds, very rarely do you get a germination rate of 100% female seeds. So there are going to be some rogue males even in these feminized fields. Having protocols for pro operators to be out there, they have to rogue their males. If they do actually produce pollen sacs and start pollen drift, then I would recommend the 10-foot clearing area, but giving people the chance to actually rogue and cull the males early without having to destroy a 10-foot area is going to, just be better operations and procedures for farmers. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. First, I'd love to applaud the board and the public both for coming together on all these issues. I think that it's, I've seen this take place in Nevada County as well. I also have 2 licenses up in Eugene, Oregon. And so we've actually already been, I have personally been through a lot of these.
You can state your name really fast for the record.
I'm sorry, Chris Golden.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, we started in 2016 in Oregon, very much the same way California is now. As of 2018, we were also allowed to start our CBD indoor hemp cultivation, if you will. We, as a farm, 2-acre farm, 2 separate licenses, mixed lighting, indoor, outdoor, and greenhouse. We lost a total of 300 pounds last year due to an adjacent open pollinated field. And so, at that time, the market value of that is around $240,000 to $260,000. Oregon is really great when it comes to regulations, placing regulations, and in my opinion, even better at enforcing the regulations than California is currently. I think that this is maybe one of the most important issues that we're going to address when it comes to the cultivation of any type of cannabis sativa, L, Z, doesn't matter what it is. The thought to move THC cannabis producers inside of a greenhouse or indoors while we allow the hemp or CBD growth to be done outside is absolutely preposterous. I can't even imagine that this board would take that as a consideration. And so I hope you do not. If this public and ourselves can remember, this whole forum is open for us now because we started with the desire from the public to have THC-driven products. It's a great open door, and I want to also support both the growth of hemp and CBD products, seeing how as if in Oregon, even though last year we did get devastated, we also now currently have a hemp license as well, okay? So that we can better educate ourselves as to what we're asking of our other growers, if you will, and making sure that we're not asking something of them which is as preposterous as just switching everybody into greenhouses. I definitely hope that this county respects the fact of taking opinion from each grower. I don't know how much experience of growing cannabis any of you have on this board, and so I think it's really important to hear from the farmers, whether they were illicit in the rears or whether they're legal now. I really challenge the question of, or the statement that seed production and/or male pollination would be kept to indoors. I would really like for that to be a little more clear. Like when we say indoors, are we talking behind a door in a greenhouse, or are we speaking about actual indoors? I have 2 licenses here in Lake County, and we are technically at risk of one of these permits which you have allowed, and it's an illegal grow right now. So how are they getting permitted? And for hemp production, seed production, that will take out 2 of your paid farms right now. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Tom Nickel, Scotts Valley. I have a 8-acre hemp grow next door to me. I have several issues about it, and which there may be some ordinances that may have to be addressed for it. This grow is probably 20 feet from my property line, 80 feet from my house. My neighbor bulldozed and disked and ring-rolled his property for 3 weeks. The dust was terrible. He started at 3 in the afternoon and didn't finish until 10 o'clock at night. What a lot of people don't realize is that there's still pesticides and herbicides still in our dust, in our soil here, and it's in the dust. And when you raise a cloud of it, which was so bad I couldn't even see the neighbor on the other side of him, and you have to keep your doors and your windows closed, it seems preposterous to me. I haven't experienced any odors coming from it yet, but I anticipate that I will. And I think that we need to have some setbacks that may help with that, so that the density isn't so great that it's such a great amount of odors emanating from it to affect a homeowner. My neighbor on the other side, the plants are probably 2 or 3 feet from his fence line, his property line. And during this procedure of 3 weeks of doing this ground preparation, his house was totally inundated. His pool was full of it. Anyway, my understanding is that this crop can be grown and harvested 3 times a year. I do not wish to see the same procedure 3 times a year. That's just unreasonable. So some ordinance has to be placed on dust mitigation and possibly the setbacks to reduce the odor. Thank you.
Wouldn't that be under a grading permit? Don't they have to get a grading permit to? I know that's through community development.
Yes, community development.
No, but
yeah.
there are you can't, I mean, the right to farm is one thing, but fugitive dust and sprays and pesticides, there's already ordinances against that,
Yeah.
so.
Hi, Mark Borgasani. I'm in Kelseyville. So I'm a person who's impacted by this. I have seen some good. I've seen a lot of blight go away, a lot of old blighted orchards cleaned up, and made look better. But I have the same issue as the gentleman in Scotts Valley, 6-lot subdivision right next to RR. That a field was planted and right up to my property line. And so I'm here more today just finding out what's going on, with where you guys are headed. I do know that, the Planning Commission really had no idea. In fact, I know for a fact that the Planning Commissioner, or at least one of them, had no idea of any grows going on at all. And in finding out and doing a little research, he was then informed that the ag department was in full control of approving these grows.
Of ag.
Of ag, yeah.
Planning commissioner should not have been surprised at that.
So, exactly. But when we talk about dust ordinances, setbacks, use permits, all these types of things, these are all planning commission level decisions in conjunction with what's going on with the ag. So, there's a lot to go through. I mean, I'm not opposed to it now. I see it's something we're going to have to live with. But, when you have this, when you have I have investments just like these people do. At first, it was residences and homeowners and stuff arguing against, marijuana grows, and now it's the marijuana grows arguing against the hemp grows. So it's all getting a little confusing, and it's going to be tough for you guys to get it straightened out. But in the end, living in Lake County, we know what the right to farm is. When you sell a piece of property, you sign a little document on your title. It says, people have the right to farm. We just need to know what's going on. And again, residences are just as important. As Rob said, most of the population of Lake County does not farm. They just drive by it, and I'm one of those people. I know all about it. It's all around me, but I don't do it. So I'm not going to tell these people how to do it, but I do know about building houses and residents and development and property values and all of that. And I don't know what this is going to do to my property values of my nice lots that, I have, and I've got a home I'm going to hope to sell for around $700,000. And now I've got a nice cell tower tank and a hemp grow right next to it. And I don't know what that's going to do to it, but think about us too, on the other side, on the business side of it. They're all businessmen too, but I'm a businessman also, and I'm impacted. I just don't know what it's going to be in the long run, but would appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you.
Is there some way we could put in our regulations that before they can get their permit for hemp, that they have to show that they have proof of a grading permit or whatever other permits that they need?
That's been suggested already. The county could do that if they want to. We've talked to the state about that, and we could delay a permit for someone, or a permit to grow hemp if the board wants to. But I know that it's been suggested already. I said no because we don't do it for other ag crops.
Exactly.
But if the board wants to make an extra step for a current legal ag crop, they certainly can.
It just seems like it's been an issue. That's probably the biggest
Absolutely,
complaint
it's been an
that
issue.
I have seen is the
See,
hemp growers.
in the past, people who are walnut grape pear growers, I believe they care more about the community. I do. And because they do, and they live here, when their neighbor complains, they do the best they can. I'm not seeing that in some of the hemp growers.
Supervisor Brown?
So, again, we're faced with an issue here that we're trying to resolve by committee up here, and there's a lot of good suggestions up here, but this is not where it's going to get resolved. There's a lot, it's just like that question right there about requiring the hemp growers to have a grading ordinance, and not anybody else. And I don't want anybody else to. And that's why I think it's a bad idea, because it sets a bad precedent that now then we're going to start with the next crop and the next crop. And with Mark, I totally see where Mark's going, where we were talking about, the cannabis. We were complaining about the cannabis and worrying about that. Well, I'll remind Mark, he'll remember this, but back when that area and other areas were being subdivided, the ag people were going, no, don't let that happen, because these people then now are going to start complaining about our ag operations. Well, here we are. So it's always a conflict in zoning, and that's why we got to be thoughtful in it and not reactionary. It was kind of interesting that you just said this hemp thing is the biggest issue that I've dealt with. It's not been the biggest issue that the county's dealt with, but it's been the biggest one in the last 2 or 3 years. So there have been a lot of things, and we can't react to an issue. We have to plan for the inevitable of another. Let's face it, hemp comes and goes, cannabis comes and goes. I don't have faith that it's going to be here for long. Anyway, they're already stockpiling up in Oregon enough to supply California for the next 6 years. So it's all about money. People aren't going to make money out. They're not going to do it anymore. Grapes, other crops like tree crop, you put a significant investment in, you got to be in it for years. This stuff, they grow it. They're making that's a gold rush type thing. In a year, 2 years, it's going to be plowed under. Something else is going to come and go. So we don't react and create ordinances just for a crop that will then, this is my biggest fear, that we create taxes, we create bureaucracy that supports a crop. When that crop goes, the bureaucracy is not going to go anywhere. So how do we fund that? We tax the other crops that are already here. And I don't want that. I don't want to see that happen. So we have to be thoughtful with it and not react to creating all these ordinances and all these regulations and requirements that, first of all, can't be enforced to begin with. You know, we don't have the people, we don't have staff, we don't have the money to enforce it. So let's be thoughtful about it and come up with a real solution, not just something reactionary that's just knee-jerk, which is basically what we're kicking around right now.
And what I said too, hemp hasn't been my biggest issue. The biggest issue with hemp has been the illegal grading of just going out.
What illegal grading? Which
Those
one?
are the complaints that I've been hearing from my community is the grading that's being happening with the hemp. That's the only.
But have you
issue.
seen, okay, and I'm not saying it's not happening, but I haven't heard that from staff who actually went out and said, yeah, this is an illegal grading
No,
operation.
that's what I'm hearing from my constituents.
Okay, so, yeah.
Really quick, since you've already done your 3 minutes.
Rob, did I hear you correctly say that there is a ordinance for dust mitigation? Is that
There's,
it in ag or is that for
Air quality.
construction?
Air quality. Air quality has, fugitive dust and pesticides and other things. There are regulations in place to protect people from that. There's going to be some level of it, but it depends on if it's excessive or not.
Yeah, okay. Well, I went to the air quality and they said there was nothing they could do about it.
Nothing you can do about
And
any
they
dust.
referred me to Steve, and Steve says there's very limited he can do anything about it either.
Is there anything that can be done about it?
Okay, Doug and I have this arrangement. If it's cannabis, it's his because it's not a crop. If it's hemp, since it is a crop, it's up to me. That's the arrangement that we've kind of made out, but I don't know of any rules that I do that deal with dust. And
Well, the state has regulations on fugitive dust and pesticides.
I guess
so-
they do, but pesticides are different. If someone was spraying and they drifted, that is
Right.
something that we do exactly. But
Okay,
dust,
maybe we
no.
should look into that then, because just because it may be something there that is, if it's excessive and it's not allowed, and we're just not able to enforce it, then we need to know that.
Hello, my name is Richard Durham, a cannabis farmer. The people in cannabis have put up a lot of money, a lot of time to get their licenses. And I just believe we should have rules in place that protect us. Recently, the vaping industry took a big hit, and the value of flower is going to increase significantly. Lake County is probably one of the best places to grow outdoor flower, full term. And it's not an industry that's going to disappear because it's been in the black market for over 40 years in Lake County. It's just come to light. I was at a convention where statisticians were saying that 40% of the market will be outdoor flower. We're in a really great position to have a long-term, real successful industry. I believe in live and let live. I want hemp to be in the county. I'm not against it. I do believe that the reckless allowing of pollen to be blowing all over the county, it shouldn't happen. And I'll just have to leave that in your guys' hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So next public comment?
My name is Danielle Fontenot, and we are looking at land in Clear Lake. I do want to say that we are surrounded by, our location is surrounded by 3 hemp farms right now that could affect us. So, but I came up here to say, if we can't regulate right now, then we should have ordinances set in place ahead of time, ideally to kind of nip it in the bud before it happens, if that makes sense. If you're not going to be able to enforce it anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we tried to pass a moratorium, but we couldn't get the votes to make that pass
Okay,
till we got this regulation in place.
okay. By regulations, I mean like the.
Or this ordinance.
Yeah. I think that's all I have to say. Along with Lake County as an outdoor growth. So We have the best air, we have the best sun. So for us to start growing it indoors, not only because it's going to cost a lot more, we're already heavily taxed, we already have these costs in place, it all costs an additional amount. So ideally, I wouldn't like that to happen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I got a question for you. You said you were in Clear Lake?
Yes.
In the city of Clear Lake?
I think she's just outside on Augulin Canyon.
Yes.
Yeah, she's.
Okay, so it's in the county. Okay.
Hello, Erin McCarrick, City of Clear Lake. Just a quick question, and thank you guys for taking this up. It's obviously of importance to a lot of people and a lot of items to touch on, so it probably won't get passed in full. But just a quick question, maybe touching on what she was saying. Is there anything, either recourse that hemp or cannabis farmers could take, or maybe a mini ordinance that could pass that could help this year so that people don't have to have an entire crop be infected by seed production? Because, Commissioner, you're right. There are definitely some hemp seed producers who are not being great neighbors and saying, yep, I got seeds. Oh, well. And how do you do that when you say, please, 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 just cut down that male, and there's no recourse? So is there any, is there anything?
In my
Not that'll save anybody from this year's crop.
Yeah, in my opinion, this year, it's going to be messy, and hopefully we can get to a final destination with an ordinance for hemp so that next year is not going to have to be this messy.
Stephen?
Yeah, the state is working the feds and the state are both working on regulations. May not address everything here, but while we're working on our own ordinance here, there'll be state regulations addressing the same thing that the ordinances will be addressing. So even if we get an ordinance done, who knows what the state's going to say?
Right.
Just say.
There's even been conversations at the state to say no CBD for hemp, and that belongs in the cannabis industry. So we have no idea where it's going.
Right. Just beware of that.
Hello, almost good afternoon. My name is Mary Draper, and I'm from Kesselville, and I own property in Lucerne also. I really appreciate your being here today because this is a major issue. I am quite surprised that there aren't more people up here today with urgency in their voice as to losing their total investment as they've put in so far. As you know, pollen travels, and if that pollen ends up impregnating their plants, cannabis plants, they can no longer sell it for flower. It's going to bring the THC down, and once your product is seeded, it's really virtually of no value. The issue isn't just for cannabis, it's also for hemp. Because if hemp is pregnated and you wanted to raise it for CBD and it's done by a cannabis grower, then their field is no longer good either because their THC level is too high. There's a lawsuit going on in Oregon where the cannabis growers are suing a hemp grower because it's destroyed their fields. And then the hemp grower is suing a cannabis grower because the cannabis grower impregnated his plants and now all his level of THC is too high. There's a lot of anger going on in Oregon and Colorado both, and we don't want to see that come to our county. I believe that through an ad hoc committee, we can come up with some really good solutions for both hemp and cannabis to make it a more viable product. But I think right now, what I would beg you to do is pass an urgency ordinance for making male plants, whether cannabis or hemp, illegal right now, a nuisance, and they must be abated. I know there's several people that are scared to death of losing their entire investment. And I'm not just looking out for cannabis, I'm also looking out for hemp. And if you have an ad hoc committee, I would really like to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we dispel with that right now about an urgency ordinance? Is that what our intention is? I think people deserve to know that.
Here's my thoughts on it. Yes, if we made such an ordinance or an urgency ordinance, it would have a positive effect on cannabis, but there's some that might have a large majority of their hemp farm that's also male, so we will destroy their investment. And I don't think we should take sides on which investment we want to protect. We needed to make a law here. We're behind. Unfortunately, we created the situation we're in, but next year is what we're aiming to fix. And I think it's a difficult task to say which one we choose.
So is it anybody's intention to, I just wanted to make sure that,
No.
people deserve to know. Is it anybody's intention to do an
this time.
urgency ordinance? No, okay.
Morning, Jennifer Smith. I have a 2-acre cannabis farm in Lower Lake. There's a history of antagonistic crops being able to coexist, and I think that we're here to figure that out, and I appreciate the time to do that. Sadly, we weren't thoughtful in the beginning, so now we are being reactionary, and hopefully we're being thoughtful for the future. I am fully aware that we can't do anything currently. I'm in full agreement that seed production should be indoor, if we can make it that way. Seeds can't even be certified if they are grown outdoor near cannabis crops as well. So it just makes sense that we would pursue a course to make those seeds actually certified and be able to be sold on the market. You can't do that if they're being cultivated outdoor. Cornell University just released a study, and they're suggesting a 3-mile radius between cannabis and hemp. I would suggest that everybody maybe review that. I'm asking for site standards. I believe that setbacks and gates and signage should be encouraged on these farms, including enrollment in the water board. There are water board programs for multiple crops, and there's no reason why hemp shouldn't be enrolled in their own program locally. You're right, we do have significant investments at risk, and I think it's very unfair to come back to me on a farm that's been in the process for 3 years and tell me now I need to move my plants indoor because a hemp farm that paid $1,400 and planted their seeds 2 weeks later gets to come in and tell me to now build $1 million structure. Doesn't seem courteous or fair. I think that the cannabis farmers, at least I can speak for myself, I've spent a lot of money and time and energy to comply with the requests of the county. We've paid our taxes that were voted on by the county citizens that wanted us to pay those taxes, and we've done so. To put that significant investment at risk is, it's disingenuous. Mary talked about the cross-pollination of both plants. Nobody wants to be cross-pollinating. We don't want to cross-pollinate other cannabis farms. We don't want to cross-pollinate hemp farms. And again, I think we can look at that through setbacks. And finally, while I understand these are 12-month permits and that we are looking at regulations for the future, I would ask that we potentially consider a moratorium on new permits until we can get some settling of this for the sake of both sides. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead. Are you?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up again with what was said about the dust and stuff. And I think there's, already a lot of regulation for that on the books, just depending on what your zoning is. I haven't seen, a bunch of people come into a Board of Supervisors meeting to complain about somebody disking hay at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the summer. So I'm just wondering why that's all of a sudden a big issue now for some people. It's a regular agricultural activity that happens all the time on large parcels. And I've been involved with legal medical cannabis for 2 decades, and I support it, whether you're doing it legally or illegally, or it's THC or CBD. I think the regulation's getting kind of way out of control and just not cohesive. And I'm just curious of why the THC legal cannabis growers think that somewhere when they applied for a permit, there was some guarantee that that the government would make sure no pollen ever came onto their property. I don't think anyone ever promised them that.
Wrap it up since you've already had your 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn, let's not forget the timer.
Well, it doesn't matter if
Really-
they come back
really
up.
quick.
Just very quickly on the grading, Everyone always backwards legalizes it, but there are standards. CDD could speak to that better. But if you're tilling on an existing farm field, you don't need a grading permit. On the other hand, if you're clearing a bunch of RL, you should be pulling that grading permit. I think the general method that you're seeing in this county is they don't do it. So whether it's a hemp farm or a cannabis farm or whatever, choose your poison. But if it's an ag field and all that, and they're getting a bunch of dust, maybe that isn't a situation where a grading permit comes in. But in a lot of other cases, especially where they're clearing new territory, that should be applied. And there's no real mechanism for Stephen or air quality or whatever. It's just nobody's pulling the permits. And until we know that hemp registrations are coming forward and that grading is a likelihood, there's no real way to control it before the fact. The last thing is just a question, jurisdictional question, because I've been hearing about Oregon hemp mites being imported this year. His pest control authority, I don't think, is limited to the unincorporated county, so it will apply to hemp grown in the cities as well. So as we're looking at site standards and all that, some of the ordinance may end up applying to the unincorporated county, but there may be some things that Stephen needs to do in his job that would apply truly countywide. And so it's kind of a jurisdictional question that's kind of interesting. What can you apply in the unincorporated county as far as setback, site standards, what have you? But what are other things such as potency testing, what have you, destruction of pests that have a broader application? And we need to give him the tools all the tools he needs to make sure we're not bringing a bunch of pests into this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure you state your name in 3 minutes.
Hank Lesher. I'm growing some hemp over in near Hidden Valley in Lower Lake. I just wanted to check in with Steve about the what's going on up in Oregon. I talked to a gentleman who raises feminized seed up there, and he's breeds all kinds of seed, and he said that what they're doing up there is called friendly farming. And what's happening is, in large part, is people are planting 300 and 400 acres of hemp plants. And in these scenarios, what they do is they harvest at week 14 and they settle for 3 or 4% CBD instead of the scenario where you just use feminized seed and you wait until it goes full term, and then you just use the flowers and leaves and you get 14% CBD. So in these huge crops, which seems to be the future of 300 and 400 acres planted like corn, there'll be both males and females, but they'll be harvested before the males can pollinate the females or cause a problem for any other growers. So I wanted to make sure that that's covered in the ordinance, that's permissible, because that's the wave of the future. And the other thing I wanted to ask, and that kind of segues into it, you guys didn't talk yet about this ad hoc committee. Who's going to be on it, and can you guys speak to that? Because we can all have some hemp growers on there, cannabis growers, and contribute to a comprehensive ordinance that is good for everybody.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as soon as we're done with public input.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. I'm Michael Wegner, and I have clients on both sides of the table, the hemp growers and the cannabis growers. And for the most part, everybody seems to agree with each other as far as having the pollen controlled and open pollination being bad for both sides. You know, if you're producing seeds and I have a cannabis farm next to you and say my male pollen from my cannabis plant now winds up in your seed stock, and then you're out selling seed stock that's actually hot hemp, obviously it lies, that's an issue. It's just an industry standard. One of the things I really wanted to bring up, because we've talked about what does hemp do for the county and what does cannabis do for the county, and I think Steve could probably answer me best, which is how much money does the county actually get per cultivation license, and then how many sites per cultivation license can be added to that, so we can kind of figure out a number of how much money is being brought into the county from the hemp versus the cannabis, because the cannabis is millions of dollars, right, and only expected to go up. We got 20 permitted grows right now, and we're looking at probably another 100, hopefully, right? And if we look at that number, we're talking about $15 million that would be a consistent incoming revenue just in the taxes alone for the square footage that the cannabis growers are using. Steve, could you tell us how much you anticipate or what it looks like as far as how much money the county will actually make by having the hemp there?
Just a point of order, Madam Chair. Questions need to be addressed to you. It's been kind of going on all day.
All right. Thank you, Anita.
Sorry.
And it's a rhetorical question. He doesn't have an answer to.
Yeah, I don't think we can answer that.
We don't know how much money goes to the county from a hemp farm?
The ag commissioner wouldn't know that, no. Or what it would be ongoing.
Sure, but even currently, I'm just asking if there's a figure or a number, and if we're comparing the two as far as what is best for the
I
county.
don't think you can
No,
compare the two.
the answer is no.
Okay.
We don't have that available.
All right. Well, I think all the other subjects have been touched on, and I really appreciate you guys bringing all this stuff forward, because for either of these two industries to exist together or coexist, this whole forum has got to be complete, and I think most people realize it is going to be a year-long process, or next year is what we're really talking about, so I applaud you guys for bringing this all forward. It's been a long fight, and I'm sure it's going to continue.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
More public comment, and then we'll move on with direction.
Lance Williams, doing cannabis hopefully soon, and have a hemp license. I really, again, I'm another person who would applaud this getting put together, asked for it a couple weeks ago, and very excited to see this starting to move forward. And I'm not going to call it hemp, I'm just going to call it cannabis while I'm up here, because one's low THC, one's high THC, so let's just call it cannabis. I don't want any of my cannabis, whether it's low THC or high THC, pollinated. Again, I'm not giving other people permission to, let's talk about the birds and the bees, have sex with my crop. And if I'm not giving someone permission, it's rape. And so I don't need my female plants raped. And that's why there's a lot of anger in the community, if you think about it. Everyone laughs about the birds and the bees, but that really comes down to it, is that this is something, whether I'm doing hemp for oil or cannabis, again, this is sinsemilla, and again, that's a virgin flower that is not impregnated. And again, I'm really happy this is going forward, and really quite sad that it's kind of come down to this. All the cannabis people I've talked in the county, except for 2 who intend to do seeds, want this indoors or in greenhouses, but we've already seen that greenhouses, they have to be very expensive to do that because they're opening them up midday. So, I mean, I'm really excited that this is going to, start to go into some kind of fruition. But I would like to say that currently we've got some seed people. Again, I checked the certifiers right now at Davis, and there's still no laws, so people are currently doing illegal seeding from what I can see. And we have no way to really do that. And again, right now, as it was pointed out, that we voted for cannabis. And again, they're both cannabis, whether you call it hemp or marijuana or cannabis. This is all cannabis. And when we voted for it, we did $1 square foot, $2, and $3. And currently, yes, we do have to rewrite some of this because, again, a lot of people said in the beginning, this doesn't smell like cannabis. Well, it is cannabis, and it does smell like cannabis. And we really need to revisit that at the ad hoc committee. Because, again, we voted for certain things, and I see a lot of people being offended by the smells. So, again, right now, currently, any of these seed farms cannot be certified. So, not sure what's going on there. And, again, all the hemp people for oil and all the cannabis people want these people doing seeds somewhere else. Because, again, I'm not giving you permission to destroy my livelihood or my crop. If it was a cow coming onto someone's farm with a bull coming in, well, there's a problem there too. I mean, it's just universal. And again, it's as Steve had said, bad actors, are you being good to your neighbor? Do you care about your neighbor? Do you care about this economy? Don't forget that the 6 plant grows that, California said people could have. Again, I've talked to a lot of ex-soldiers who say, I need this medicine. And they do not need their crop seeded either. So there's a lot of things going on here. Hopefully we'll be able to get to some kind of conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment before I bring it back to the board? Is this the last one? Okay.
I hope I'm the last one. Good morning. My name is Jason Taramoto. I want to address Chair Scott, Vice Chair Simon, Supervisors Brown, Crandall, and Sabatier staff that are here this morning, as well as the audience. I think this is a lively discussion, but I also want to make sure that first and foremost, I mean, I'm a Sacramento-based consultant. We have businesses in about 17 of the 58 counties throughout the state of California that are all licensed either retail or cultivation. One thing that I've always valued about this area, having vacationed up here since I was a kid, was this common sense, pragmatic approach that Lake County and Lake County residents are always known for. And I think this is a good first starting point for that. I'm up here because we were asked to attend this morning's discussion, basically building on the draft regs. I reviewed them last night after I had a brief discussion with Stephen on the phone yesterday. And just to give you maybe a 10-second background on me, I'm an advisor to the UC A&R Hemp Advisory Board, which is based out of UC Davis's Office of Innovation. I'm also an advisor to the Bureau of Cannabis Control and the California Department of Food and Ag. I really can't emphasize, based on all the discussion that's happened here this morning, that this has to be a very thoughtful, measured approach in integrating the two crops. The one thing that I want to make certain of is that the board, as well as staff, is aware that you guys can take an urgency. You guys can take an urgency action on this. You know, this is an action that would be relevant to an already established set of regs. The fact that there wasn't an already established set of regs for people that are going to be looking for permits in the next year doesn't negate the fact that you can, in fact, kill off this crop or at least mitigate the impact that it's going to have on the existing crop for folks that have already paid for their licensing fees, gone through the permit process. As far as the setbacks are concerned, odor mitigation is obviously one of them, but pollen drift, pesticide drift, any other particulate matter, yes, there are ordinances that are already established in Yolo County, Riverside. We've dealt with those. And I would advise you, if you have the time, to talk to your peers in those other counties to understand how that happened. We have established organic zones in Yolo County where you can't do any sort of aerosol spraying of pesticides, and that's to protect the organic certification of those crops that are certified organic. And to go back to the fines issue, there have been some different approaches on how to do this. Excuse me. In Sonoma County, Tim Ricard put in a very progressive fine policy where it wasn't punitive in the sense that you would lose your license if you violated the ordinance. You would just start accruing these progressive fines. In this case, a $500 fine is correct in that that's a one-time issue. It's not enough. But if you fine it $500 a day or $500 per instance of male plant, then that becomes something that these guys pay attention to. Thank you for your time. I hope we end up having a more lively discussion during the ad hoc. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Stephen.
Just one quick note, whatever the board, whatever this ends up to be, enforcement is the key, and we don't have anyone to enforce these at this time. So you can put whatever you want in place, but unless there's enforcement that we have the capacity to do, then it's not going to do any good. So I'm just letting you know.
Okay. Close public comment, bring it back to the board. I think we need to be... Is there any discussion on the ordinance that we're looking at, or should we just move on to the B, formation of an ad hoc committee, and have them further the discussion?
That way we don't get stuck in the weeds.
Yeah. So Anita, did you want to, how did you want to form, or did you have any thoughts about forming? I know this was your, or
This was
Stephen?
just a prior discussion of the board about bringing it back for ad hoc, so that is
This is the board's thing, not
All
county
right,
council's
so the
thing.
board, so how does the board wish to put together this ad hoc committee?
I would suggest that we need some, one or two cannabis farmers and one or two hemp farmers, either the Farm Bureau, a good mix to understand that of people who understand the needs of the crop and understand the needs of agriculture,
And a board member?
I would say one person, if possible, from CDD, one person from the Ag Commissioner's Office, which again, we were just told was tight as far as now adding something on top of that, but hopefully these meetings don't have to last 3 years.
That's 8, I think. So how should we go about forming this?
Your board can determine to take applications from the outliers, if you will, in terms of cannabis and/or hemp growers and whomever else. You can, if you want the Farm Bureau involved, you can simply request that they send a member, as you would with other departments. This would, despite the descriptor as an ad hoc committee, this would be a Brown Act compliant committee given the nature of its composition. So you'll have to ensure that you post your agendas properly 72 hours in advance, and that you have minutes of the meeting taken, and you stick rigorously to the agenda.
Supervisor Sabatier, are you willing to be on this ad hoc committee?
Sure.
Anybody else?
Just one board member or two?
I don't know.
Two would be good.
In my opinion, I'm not an expert on ag, and with 8 already on the board, I would suggest that those who are experts in the field should bring us what kind of regulations they would like to see. And I think that if we invite those who are affected by it, which would be the hemp farmers and the cannabis farmers, they're going to be able to hash this out a whole lot better than myself involved. And then we can hash it out when it comes to us here at the board level. Because we're already at a number that I think is getting to be too large of a group.
Yes, and then when you get too large, it's hard to get everybody's
I count 7
calendars.
though, slots.
Count 7.
And I think 7 is where we should stop. My opinion.
If you have 2 board members, it would be 7.
2 cannabis, 2 hemp, 2 board members, CD, community development.
Oh, it would
1
be
ag.
1 cannabis, 1 hemp was my.
Oh, 1 cannabis, 1 hemp?
If you had 2, you'd have 9.
Here's what you need, because everybody can come, everybody can weigh in on these things. It's a public meeting.
Yeah.
You have 1 hemp, 1 cannabis, 1 from Farm Bureau, 1 from community development, and 1 from the ag commissioner, and that's it.
That's 5.
That's 5.
That's perfect.
That's all you need. And anybody else, and yeah, 2 board members can be on it. If Bruno will do it, I'll do it, because I'm a big believer, I'm not gonna ask somebody to do something I'm not willing to do myself. So if we're going to be involved with it, 1 can be an alternate even, it doesn't matter. But I think you need to keep it simple, and then you can have, the room be packed full of growers on both sides weighing in on it, so.
So we have to make sure that we have a room big enough available then.
You need a big room the first day, and then the next
Yeah.
day they'll stop showing up, as every other committee that we've ever had on this subject. So we'll have it down, we could have it on the back of a motorcycle by the time we're done, so,
We still haven't gotten off the topic of soil after 3 times.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Do you want us to advertise for the cannabis and hemp slots, or what is your preference
Yeah.
there?
I
Yeah,
think
just
so.
to say submit applications.
And should we advertise for the Farm Bureau or just ask them to appoint?
I believe you just have to ask.
I agree.
And then the 2 county departments, well, it'll be Steve and somebody from CDD.
Okay, is there anything further before we go on to the
So
next
they
step?
just do one of these commission or committee
Yeah.
forms?
Application.
Right.
Is there anything further? Okay, then we'll move on to the next item. Our 7.2 item, consideration of appointment of a supervisor as alternate to the Eel River Commission.
Can I ask a question, just real quick? For the sake of the rest of the meeting, I would ask that we bring back the item regarding, let me see what item it is, the sales tax measure.
Oh, for the road?
Yeah, just 6.5, just for some clarification on that, before we move forward. I had some additional information that I wanted to share with the board.
You want to open it?
Yeah, I want to open it
today?
back up, and maybe Scott could come down, not necessarily that he needs to weigh in on anything, but just for his information. And then we have closed session, so are we going to just power through?
I'm
and get
hoping to
done, or
power
we're gonna-
through.
Or are we going to go to lunch?
I don't mind either way.
Okay, I just need to know so I can cancel an appointment at 12:30, so.
I'm hoping to power through.
All right.
Can we take a short restroom break?
We could take a short
Yeah.
respite break before we do closed session.
Yep, okay.
All right, so I need a motion then to.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so let's take up 7.2 and then why Scott's coming down, somebody can
Okay,
contact
and
him.
Chris, you might want to stick around for that 6.5 if you could. I don't think you have anything to weigh in, but I want you to be able to hear what we talk about and maybe pass it on.
All right, so Supervisor Crandall, 7.2.
Okay, so I was appointed as the delegate for the EO Russian River Commission, and I've been the sole representative, which is not a problem. I enjoy going. I'm learning a lot being on it, and it keeps me in the loop with the Potter Valley Project and the ad hoc commit, the 2 basin solution, all of that good stuff. But at the same time, I've been noticing the other counties have an alternate, and so I talked to the other county supervisors, and then also talked to the chair of the EO Russian River Commission, and then talked to our staff. And so I just wanted to see if we could appoint one, and I noticed that before there wasn't one. I think we should have an alternate no matter what, because I'd hate to not be able to go if something happens. Like, for example, I have surgery next month on my nose, and so if I can't go to something, I'd hate for there not to be an alternate or something like that because of a medical situation or an emergency. So,
Is there anybody willing to step forward and be the alternate?
I offer my name to be placed as the alternate.
You're busy. Yeah, it's good. I'm not saying no.
Okay.
You're good.
So moved.
So moved. Okay.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Any
opposed?
public input?
Oh, public input. Any public input on this item? Okay, seeing none, motion carries.
excellent, thank you.
Let's do calendars while we wait for Scott to come down. Supervisor Sabatier,
My computer's coming back up.
or is anybody else ready? Supervisor Crandall.
I'll go. So today, I have a phone call at 4 with some folks from the Walker Ridge project. They're going to talk to me about some, I guess, updates. Tomorrow I'll be on the North Shore. Thursday I have Fire Safe Council. I have a meeting with the constituents on Friday. I'm going to be discussing some of the RV. It'll be on the agenda for next week, but just talking with some other folks that have some input on the RV article. Was it 41 in our codes? And so I just wanted to have some pre-discussions with some folks. And the Rodman Slough cleanup on Sunday. We'll be doing the road out there with Thomas Aceves. And then CAO meeting on Monday, and back here for a board meeting on Tuesday.
Wonderful. Supervisor Sabatier?
So tomorrow I have a Lake APC and LTA board meeting. Hoping that it might end early enough. So far the agenda seems fairly light, actually surprisingly light. So I might make it to a CC4C meeting where I was invited to attend. Thursday be a judge's breakfast in Clear Lake City Council later on that evening. And I am going to meet with a Ukiah City Council member who is going to be running for Board of Supervisors. Her and I started at the same time when I got on the City Council. Her name is Mo Mulheron. I think I said her last name correct. And she's actually a pretty talented person and skilled in what she's been doing. She's the leader of the Redwood region for the League of Cities, and just really involved in what's going on in her city and her area. So hoping that we have a good conversation about what we can do to work together. Then I'll be back here on Monday and studying up for our next meeting for Tuesday and meeting with CAO.
Okay. Supervisor Simon?
Support meeting today. I did have an appointment 2 at 1, but I'm not going to make that. So tomorrow morning, Lake Transit Authority Area Planning Council with Bruno. And in the evening, I have the Lower Lake Action Committee group. Thursday, I have pre-construction meeting down in Anderson Springs on 9/10. And then Thursday night, I have math meeting. Friday, we'll be doing my office hours in Lower Lake. And then Friday evening, we're going down to Hayward to coach the Mustangs against Murrow Catholic. Saturday morning, the 14th, I think our soccer day is on finally.
I forgot about that.
For the Clear Lake Soccer on Saturday, 8 a.m. It'll be my first jamboree or whatever they call it for soccer with the grandkids, but it'll be neat. So we're doing that in the morning with Bruno. And then later in the afternoon, I'll be performing a wedding. And then back here on Monday for the Risk Reduction Authority. And also I talked about it a couple weeks ago, or at least a week ago, about the potential of governor's appointment on the State Board of Fire Services, and that announcement should come out later this afternoon that I have been appointed by the governor's office.
Awesome.
Thanks for
To
representing.
which thing?
The State Board of Fire Services.
Got it.
Supervisor Brown.
So I've got several meetings scheduled after this, depending upon what time we get done. We're going to meet with Jan Coppinger. Is that still, Carol, have you talked to her at all, or?
I have not.
She said she was flexible to meet with us
Yeah.
afterwards, so.
I haven't had a chance because I didn't know how long we would be
Right.
here.
Okay. And then I have a meeting with Michaelin, Community Development Director, this afternoon as well. A meeting scheduled with a contractor regarding some issues with environmental health. That may be actually over the weekend, so I'm not sure about that just yet either, depending on their schedule. Then back in the office on Monday.
All right, in my calendar, after the meeting today, we have agenda review, and then I'll be attending the fire board meeting here in Lakeport. Tomorrow, I'll be meeting with some constituents and some other members of some nonprofits in our community looking for housing for our homeless. And then tomorrow, I'll be down in Middletown for a track meet for the high school. And then on Thursday, I'm going to be attending the seating of the grand jury in the morning. I have a Sir Optimus lunch at noon, and then we'll be dining out for hospice. There will be lots of restaurants in Lake County. We'll be donating a percentage of the money you spend to hospice that night. Friday looks pretty open. We have a football game here at Clear Lake. And then also, first I'll be attending the suicide Ripple video that's coming to our community, talking about suicide prevention and what we can do to help with that. Monday, I have a phone call with a group of people that's looking to bring resources into our community for our foster families. And then a Hope Rising Governing Board meeting at 3:30, and then back here on Tuesday. And then we're waiting for Scott. Did somebody get a hold of him?
I can start before that.
Okay.
I wanted him to be aware of.
We're going to reopen our 6.5 item, discussion and direction to seek to offer voters the ability to vote on sales tax measure to improve roads. Supervisor Brown.
Mostly, I'm asking that we put off any direction or any discussion till next Tuesday. And the reason for that is, and I'm not going to speak for them, but I was texting because I was curious about another competing measure that is in our interest as well. And competing measures aren't going to be good for either one. So if there's a chance to have a discussion with representatives from the Sheriff's Department prior to that, and then come next Tuesday, and then give direction based on the outcome of that, I think that would be beneficial to all of us. There may be a way to accomplish both. But anyway, I don't want to speak on behalf of my communication with John Drury, who's been working on it. They've got things written up. They've got something ready to go. So I don't want to create a situation where it's neither one or the other that we have to choose to. So that maybe we can work on both. So.
And I think at this moment, we don't have anything set in stone to say it will be on November 2020. We might receive the information and use that information that we surveyed and say, okay, we'll postpone it till 2021 or whatever. But I did have communication with the Sheriff's Office because I was aware that they were also interested in pursuing some tax measure of sorts, and I believe their plan was to do a special election, as they believe that would be their best bet to win the support.
And that could be, but I think we need to know
Right.
all of that before we give direction, because you can only get so much to begin with. That tax can only be so much, and if one is asking for all of it, then the other one is also asking for all of it, then they're competing.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we're all talking, and that discussion can take place between now and then, and Tuesday, and then we can decide from them, rather than give direction now like we did, some form of direction. Then I think we can, or we can move forward. It's up to you guys. I just think we should wait.
I would suggest that we move forward because of the time frame. If it will continue for November 2020, the time frame to get the survey created, done, accomplished, and received, and back to our board. If we still, after our conversation, say 2020 is still a possibility, then at least we have the information ready to go. We don't have to act on that information right away, we can hold that information and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and support this other one first and then move with the roads at a later time. So I think that just the direction of moving forward for the APC's actions don't necessarily prohibit us from moving forward with another measure, is my opinion.
Well, we're asking for money to be spent, so that's the reason I bring it up.
But the money could be spent and still be used for an election.
Because the survey would be at least relatively still recent that we can utilize that.
So are we interested in not, I mean, I realize you want to get moving on it, but I'm asking until next Tuesday, so if we can do both, I guess, keep moving and then still talk about it on Tuesday. But anyway, I guess the thing is just, I encourage, the two board members that are interested in this, have a discussion with the sheriff's department, not some anonymous, the sheriff's department, but actually specifically, Sergeant Drury and whoever else is working on this, and find out where they are with it. I was surprised that they're that far along.
Yeah, no.
So.
Should we put this back on the agenda for next week so we will be able to come
Carol, what
back
do you
and
think? What
discuss
are your
it?
thoughts on that?
Why don't we invite LCDSA to come and present if they're willing? The last time I checked on this, I wasn't able to get any updated info. So if they're willing, we can reach out to them.
He couldn't come today because he's doing other things, but I did ask him if he would come next week, and I haven't heard back from that, but I asked him if he could, if we requested that, but at least have a meeting prior to that. Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is the Deputy Sheriff's Association.
Right.
And not the Sheriff's Department.
I get it.
He was in court the other day, in work state should, so I would accommodate his schedule if he's available.
Yeah.
During Tuesday, he was on patrol.
Okay.
I got the impression he was off today, so.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him
Okay.
and ask him if he would be on the agenda next.
Supervisor Simon?
Okay.
No, I think Rob brings up a good point. I would be willing to wait till next week. Obviously, I think we'd hopefully get the same outcome as far as the road situation, but having information from the Sheriff's Department, I think, is definitely something in the conversation since I've been on board and talking with Scott and everything, not only with the roads, but we're constantly inundated with calls about response times and other things, so I think it's very important. So I'd be willing to wait one more week.
The other information that I'd like to have is how much do we pay right now and how much are we allowed to go up? Because there are limitations on that. And
It's a statutory limit.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Supervisor
That's it.
Crandall?
The only thing I had was moving faster on it because of your meeting tomorrow? Is that?
No,
Okay.
no, it has nothing to do with our APC meeting.
Oh, so it's not on the agenda for tomorrow?
Okay.
So moving it a week wouldn't hurt it then? Because we wouldn't be able to have the money to do the study?
I don't think it would put us in jeopardy to not finish what needs to be done timely.
Okay, so if we agree to put it on the agenda then, again, for next week?
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. You've given direction to staff, and although Scott's not here, do you want that direction to continue and just put the matter on next week, or did you want him to hold?
We have 1, 2 holds. What do you, should we? 'Cause
No,
you asked-
I'm okay with holding, so
Hold
you
it,
already
okay.
have the 3.
Go ahead and hold it.
And I can make sure and communicate with Scott as well and let him know.
Okay.
And I would say not to continue that specific agenda item, but to open it up so that we can discuss the sheriff's
Initiative.
department's
And ours.
initiatives.
Yeah, at the same time. Sure. Okay, I think with that, I have completed all open session items. Then we will now go into closed session. 8.1, Public Employee Evaluations, Title Animal Control and Director and County Administrative Officer. 8.2, Conference with Legal Counsel, Existing Litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, County of Lake et al. Versus PG&E et al. With that, we'll go into closed session.